move to approve consent agenda items A through C.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Old business, approve Opportunity Academy early graduate request.
We'll continue to get these as we talked last month. One of those students, I happened to be on the campus when we finished all these courses. That was pretty cool.
I move to approve early graduation for Opportunity Academy students who are on pace to meet their credit requirements.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Approve Head Start transportation reduction.
If you remember from last month, they went over the reasons why we need to consider this in terms of being able to stay budget neutral. We recommend that you approve it as presented.
I move to approve the reduction in Head Start transportation effective for the 2021-22 school year as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Head Start 21-22 continuation application.
This is a copy of the application that she said she would have for you guys at this time. If you would look over that between now and the 22nd, you'll approve it on the 22nd, so that they can get submitted on time for funding. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or Sarah, and we will do our best to answer. I think the application is only about 30 pages long, so it won't take you that much time to get through that. But, there's always a lot of documentation with the federal program.
New business, approve gift request.
I move to approve the gift request as presented. Community National Bank to the high school FFA donation to cover their expenses in the amount of $500. And Community National Bank interest to USD 373 cash donation for miscellaneous capital outlay expenses in the amount of $210.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Approve Jobs for America's graduate program extension.
This is a program that's been in the district for some time. It's a great program. It takes place at Prison in the high school. We recommend that you continue to continue that.
Move to approve the JAG programs at Newton High School and Chisholm Middle School for 2021-22 as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion of that item? All those in favor? 7-0. Approve Newton Recreation Commission NHS pool request.
The swimming pool that's being renovated up at the park is not going to be ready until the middle or the end of July. So that puts them in a bind to have access to a pool for swimming lessons. And talking with the maintenance individual and the maintenance individuals in the building principal, we think we can do that up there. And it'll take place Monday through Thursdays from like 9, I believe it is, until 9:30 until noon. And that fits into the maintenance schedule and stuff pretty well. That's about the only way that they will be able to conduct swimming lessons this summer.
I'll move to approve the use of the USD 373 pool for the Newton Rec Commission summer swimming lessons as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Approve classified and administrator wages.
Right, for this item here, I just kind of want to set it up a little bit so that you all know, it took us a while to come up with what exactly we were going to recommend to you all, and it was definitely not without looking in every corner and under every rock to figure out what we could do for our classified staff and administrators. And well, unfortunately, at the end of the day, what it came down to is us recommending to you to just allow for longevity pay, which is still about a $25,000 expense, and not increase the base by anything. And that is basically a reflection of exactly what we did with our certified staff. So we're being consistent with what we did with teachers, what we're doing with the administrators, and what we're doing with our other employees. And so that's ultimately the recommendation. And again, we definitely don't do it lightly, and we're hoping that it's something that we won't have to repeat in the near future. But looking at our finances and what we're trying to do for the school district, it seemed like it was the best option for us at this time.
Are there any questions or discussion on this item? No? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the classified and administrator wage rates as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Approve 2021-22 student fees.
This item here is not changing from what it was last year, so we're keeping student fees consistent with what they were the year before. So really no updates at this time, other than just keeping it the same.
Are there any questions, comments, any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to quickly say, I know a lot of us are, in our first year at the table here, but I've always, been vocal about student fees and how I don't think that our students and our families should be a revenue item for our general fund. And, I hope that there is a way in the future that we could look to kind of reducing some of these fees, maybe get the difference between free and reduced and full fee more in line with that of the lunches, the discounts that you get for lunches. Maybe try to remove some of the fees in general. Yeah, I'll just say that.
Is there any other comments or discussion? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 2021-2022 student fees as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Passes 6-1. Approve proposed 2021-2022 new courses for Chisholm Middle School.
We'll have a presentation by some administrators that were involved in this process. Any questions they have, they'll be able to answer, or I will step in and help when I can.
All right. Okay. Board President Morton, members of the board, Mr. Van Rankin, it's a pleasure to be back with you all again. And I'm here to bring forward two new courses at Chisholm Middle School. This has been an excellent partnership between the high school as well as Chisholm with Mr. Meninga and Mr. Nulick and their staff working to come up with some ways we can provide some new hands-on opportunities at Chisholm. And so I'd like to specifically thank them for their help and effort in this, as well as receive feedback from our Newton High School CTE teachers to help develop this plan. So I'll first start with this quote: "Career in tech ed is for all students, period." Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Maybe.
Audience participation portion of the program.
Yeah, we agree with that as well. This is from Dr. Flanders. He's the CEO and president of the Kansas Board of Regents. And all students, when they leave our campuses, we want them to hold a job and be gainfully employed at some point in their life. So that career part touches every single one of our students. We understand that not all will go into a technical trade field, but everyone should be having a career. And so we want to be able to support them with those employability skills. And that's one level that we provide support to have successful graduates. We'd like to present to you these two new course ideas this evening: Explorations in Industrial Technology and Explorations in Digital Media and Computers. Again, two new hands-on courses at Chisholm Middle School. I'll explain briefly how each would be set up. The first one is our intro to, the Explorations in Industrial Tech class. This would become an 8th grade elective course, and it would be module based. And this idea actually comes from one of our high school instructors, Mr. Brian Rickard. He structures his classes this way, and I think it would be a phenomenal structure to have at the middle school. Each of these types of concepts would be covered in different modules through Canvas. Students would have the opportunity to work through those, perhaps choosing which ones they want to start with, what order they want to work through. And then that would take approximately 2/3 to 3/4 of their semester. Then that remaining time would be spent on expanding on maybe one or two of those that they felt particularly interested in. And that could be then directed in partnership with the teacher, perhaps community partnerships coming alongside them to help them expand and explore in that particular content area. And so here's some of the concepts that we believe would be impactful at this course. Manufacturing, engine components, circuitry, hand tools, CAD software, and digital fabrication. Again, using those competency-based grading practices would be utilized in this course. And so we know exactly where students are on specific standards. The next one is Explorations in Digital Media and Computers. Similar format, it'd be module-based, just like I mentioned on the previous slide, but covering a different group of concepts. Journalism, we do some editing, computer hardware, bring in some of that coding and gaming, some things that our students are really interested in, and web page design. Again, still utilizing that competency-based grading. So here's some of our justifications for why these courses could be impactful at Chisholm. First of all, it brings early awareness to what type of career and technical education opportunities there are, not only at Newton High School, but beyond post-graduation. Hands-on experiences. It's critical to engage our students while they're in our buildings, and this is just another layer and level that we can do that. We also can take an interest-based approach where students can start to learn and take what they're interested in and see what types of careers might they be able to utilize those interests in. And then this also, again, with some vertical alignment, helps support CTE programming at the high school. We're able to expose more students to what type of opportunities that they will have as a 9th through 12th grader. Here's some of the ways that it helps support that expansion. With this course at the 8th grade level, that leads directly into Intro to Industrial Tech at the high school. And then from there, you've got multiple pathways that you could then continue on if that's something you find beneficial for you. There's welding, machining, automotive, and of course engineering. On the other side, when you look at Explorations in Digital Media and Computers, it supports these classes and pathways at the high school level. And so I group these as 9 through 12 because these ones you can kind of take in different orders and at different grade levels. So summed it up as a total high school package there for the digital media side of things. So again, feeding into what they would be able to experience at the high school level. Those are those two classes in a nutshell. So I'm definitely open for questions. Mr. Newell, did I miss anything?
It says on there that they would be electives, but essentially how it would be set up according to schedule is that students would choose one or the other. They would actually take one of the other classes. So if we've got kids that are more on the industrial side, they could take that. If they're on the computer side, they could take that. With the hopes that they could actually take both, but we would require them to choose one or the other to get an idea for the pathway. And I'll be honest with you, somebody that's new to Newton, I got the opportunity to come up and see where Ben gets to work and that whole facility, and I'm sitting there. What we need to do opportunities at the middle school because this community clearly believes in this program, and so that was a lot of this collaboration that we came up with, and I hope you support us with that.
I'd like to open up for questions on those particular courses.
On the more IT side, so
Yeah.
how's that program set up and where is all that coming from? Who's going to be coaching and teaching? Is it going to be one of our teachers? Are you going to have specialists that come in? how's that gonna look?
Good question. So you're thinking about the digital media and computers class? Yeah, so that would be, something that we would actually hire for. So that would be a position, that would be their role, is to instruct that class.
What person are you gonna look, what is that parameter, have you set that up yet?
Yeah, that's what we've been talking as a leadership team, as well as with Jane, how we could, construct that when it comes to licensure. And really, we would need someone who has some background in computers. That'd be the main component. So that'd be what we'd be looking for in that staff member. Good question. What other questions might you have?
I just want to thank you guys. I can tell you put a lot of work into this. You thought about a lot of the details. I know that we brag about our CTE program at the high school, which is a phenomenal program. And so I like that we're getting to incorporate some of our younger kids. And I love to see the collaboration between the 7, 8, and the 9 through 12. I think that's really neat to see you guys working together. I love that you're open to new opportunities and new ways that our kids might be engaged and try things that they really love every day. So thank you for your work. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks for your support. Mr. Menangel will speak next.
All right, so that is the what we're going to do. This is the how are we going to do this. So as we went into discussion about this, we kind of, as the spring has progressed with the different types of vacancies that have become at Chisholm, we've analyzed what we have and what we can do with some of these openings. So this is what we have this year as far as our elective options and positions that are going to be vacant for next year. So these are all different positions that people are leaving. And so this is what we are having to work with as far as for next year. So we've got our intro to the business and intro to woods, which are shared with staff from the high school. We have our computers class at the middle school. We have Spanish, careers, and then PE, which is also shared with another building. So then next year, this is what it would look like for Chisholm Middle School. We would have an exploration and industrial tech teacher, an exploration in digital media and computers teacher, a computer apps teacher, and then the careers, and then our PE, and then also adding an additional counselor position. And the way we've come up with this, and this has been with many meetings and lots of work with Newton High School and working with this, is moving a couple of positions from Newton High School to Chisholm Middle School in order to help us make this work. And part of this is that Newton High School feels like it's a really good feeder program into their CTE courses, and it also provides us at Chisholm Middle School the opportunity to give students that hands-on experience that they really need. So Newton High School has been great in working with us and offering to help us with some of our staffing in order to make this work for next year. So then here's a comparison of this year versus next year and what that looks like. So it's just the first two slides side by side. And then you may ask, well, why do we need a second counselor at Chisholm Middle School? And so here are some reasons why. We need to continue to address the social emotional needs of our students. And with one person, that's a lot for one person to take on. We have 479 kids in our building. It will also help strengthen the individual plan of study and career focus, which is something we're really working on, building that stronger connection, 7 through 12 and eventually 5 through 12, but having that extra counselor will allow us the opportunity to have that more individualized focus with students. It'll also give us the opportunity to have more family support because we'll have a second person who's able to provide that support for families. And it'll give them a little bit more time for student scheduling because sometimes our counselor gets overwhelmed with scheduling and doesn't have time to address the social emotional needs of students like we need to. And just to be clear, this would not involve moving a counselor from Newton High School. We would be using a vacant position from the high school to fill the Chisholm Middle School second counselor role. And then the 2 CTE courses would take the place of the Spanish class that we currently offer. And so you may ask, well, why CTE courses instead of Spanish? And that's to strengthen the ties to our NHS CTE programs, to add those hands-on classes for our students, to teach new skills for all of our students, and prepare students for the CTE pathways in Newton High School, strengthen the individual plan of study for grades 7 through 12, and it also gives us students an elective choice where they can choose either the more industrial technology or the computer pathway. So it gives them a little bit more as far as voice and choice in what they're doing. And I just want to thank everyone involved in the planning of this. This has truly been a collaborative team effort between Chisholm Middle School, Newton High School, and the district office. And I believe that this is truly a model of what we can do in this district when we support each other and work together for the benefit of our students. And there's my thank you slide. So are there any questions about this part?
Can you go back to the comparison slide on the FTEs?
Sure.
So the way I'm reading this is that there is no actual increase in FTE expense because it's basically 3.9 to flat 3.5.
That-
The two?
That is correct, and it was made very clear to us that we should not have any increase in FTE, so we worked really hard to make sure that didn't happen.
That was my contribution.
Okay.
On the new counselor, on that second piece, you said the counselor gets overwhelmed with scheduling, doesn't have time for the social emotional component. What does that scheduling look like, and what does that workload look like?
At the beginning of the year, it's pretty overwhelming with student schedules and any changes and adjustments. Then in the end of January, beginning of February, normally this year we're running a little bit behind, but end of January, beginning of February, she begins doing enrollment with the sixth grade beginning the seventh grade, and then end of March and beginning of April is seventh grade and eighth grade. So then basically from February through the end of the year is scheduling off and on. And then towards the end of the year, like in May and then a little bit in the summer, is finalizing all of those schedules. And so she has to go through almost 500 schedules individually by the time it's all done to make sure every student has the classes that they're supposed to and that it's all correct the way it's supposed to.
So that's
And that
about
takes
90% of her time is doing that.
I mean, at some points it has been this year, and this year has been a little bit different with scheduling and having, we've accommodated like requests of moving to remote and on-site, so that's been a little bit of an additional time that we wouldn't normally have. But it's still a pretty big job for one person to take on.
So there's almost no face-to-face interaction for social emotional side.
At times, when we're working with schedules, like we did a bunch of schedule changes from the end of the first semester to the second semester, and we gave her just like 3 or 4 days where she could just work on schedules, and we worked with our social workers to help cover some of the social emotional needs so that she could make those schedule changes, which we're reaping the benefits of that now, because when students need to switch between on-site or remote, we have those parent requests, now we can really easily accommodate that. So in the long run, that has worked out well that we did that, but it did require us to just have her focus on that for a few days, and while we tried to cover with other staff on our social emotional needs.
Yeah.
And we all know that coming up, we're gonna have just more and more needs with our students and our families, and so I think having that additional staff person is gonna be really important.
Absolutely.
I guess you did a great job if we don't have any questions.
All right.
I appreciate that you put all this out there. I know it's gonna be hard for some to see some of those classes not continue on, but I agree with Ian, we've seen the counselor position. I know that's gonna be huge for our students and hopefully the rest of your staff. So, and I appreciate that it's cost neutral, that's always fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
I know that wasn't easy, but thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate everybody working together and partnering together to, offer things to our students earlier, and just the great teamwork, that we have going in this district. So thank you to everybody for that. And I also think it'll be huge to have another counselor at that particular building. Thank you.
Thank you.
We normally would have you guys consider it at this meeting and then vote the next meeting. We would like, however, to have you vote at this time only because we want to be able to find those industrial arts and that business computer teacher. So, and if you If you don't feel comfortable and you wanna think about it, that's okay. But this gives us that additional 2 weeks to get these jobs posted and those folks can go, so. And we're later than we would like to be in terms of this request, obviously. We've been kind of busy, a little bit this year with other things. So it just seems like within the last month and a half that we've really been able to look at trying to hone in on some of these things.
So just one question on the counselor, we're filling that with positions from the high school?
A vacant position in the high school, yes, that is
Is
essentially.
it currently vacant? I mean, they'll have
Yes.
enough counselors?
It won't be a counseling position now.
Okay.
We're not switching, we're not changing that number of counselors up there. It's a vacant teaching position,
Okay.
instructor position.
Okay.
Are there any other comments, questions? I will entertain a motion for this item.
I move to approve the addition of the CMS courses for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second. All those in favor? 7-0. 2021-22 capital outlay plan information.
All right, hold your applause to the end. We're gonna talk about capital outlay tonight. I'm gonna try to go through it pretty swiftly, but there's a lot to talk about. I'm also gonna try not to use a whole lot of finance jargon, because really, especially for the people at home, I really need them to understand kind of the situation that we're in and give it some thought about what this means for the future of the school district and what we're trying to do. But to start out, within the board agenda items, you're gonna see that there is a capital outlay packet that's attached to the agenda. And essentially, our capital outlay is made up of revenue sources, which you can now see up there on the screen. And those expenditure, or basically those sources come to that roughly $2.187 million. That's what we project that we'll have available to spend for capital outlay. So equipment, things that can use to maintain and upgrade the school district. Right below it, there's some budget figures there that tell you what we plan on spending this year in capital outlay. So you can see that the margin's pretty thin between that 2 million roughly and that $2.18 million. That would be what we call our wiggle room in case something happens or something that we don't anticipate occurs. So they're never gonna completely balance with each other, but they're gonna be pretty close. And then you can see in those budgeted expenditures what the main items are. So there's a 5-year maintenance plan, there's money for technology, there's money for athletics, etc. And so when we scroll down a little bit more, what you can start to see here is this year's capital outlay requests. So these are the requests that we received from the units as well as the ones we came up with ourselves, and what that cost and what we actually approved to share. Sorry, my computer's being funny, but I'll keep going. So what it costs, what we approved to share. You'll notice that there's often a big difference between what something costs and what we approve. And part of that is because a lot of times I'm taking that total cost and I'm allocating it out over several years, just like what you might do at your home if you have a major expense. You might try to allocate it out over several years to save up for that car or whatever it may be. But in this case, that's what we're doing there. So there's also a column that says deny, because believe it or not, there are some things that we actually denied, and I want to point them out to you just so that we can understand where we're at. For instance, if we go to athletics, you'll see that there's a $1 million request that was put in there to have a new track installed at Chisholm. I know Joey and Chad would tell you that track at Chisholm is terrible. I don't even know if you call it a track. But it's one of those things that in capital outlay, we can't quite absorb that. So that would have to be something that's going to be down the road and for the Board of Education to consider if that's a direction they want to go in. So that was something that we weren't able to pick up here, but we were able to pick up some other things such as the annual replacement cost of football pads, wrestling mats, all these other projects that fit within there. If you go down to equipment for schools, luckily, most of the equipment that we got that were requested from the teachers and from the principals, we were able to go ahead and replace. But what I'd like to point out is that a lot of this stuff, and I really hope that you take time to look at it, especially those folks at home, is what I'm really proud of is when you look at it, there's not a lot of fluff in here. This is all stuff that's needed for instruction. This is all stuff that's either something that's broken that we're trying to replace, a maintenance item, or something that we absolutely need to deliver quality instruction to the teachers or to the students. So you're not going to see a lot of fluff. And So my message to those folks at home and to the board is that it's pretty austere. This is a budget, a capital outlay budget that has had all the fat taken out of it. It's also a year two where there's no raises being given to faculty and staff. And so the district really feels like we're doing everything we can to minimize costs and maximize returns. But on the flip side, again, setting everyone up for the clear understanding that this is going to come at an expense. And it's an expense that, as we look to the future, we have to start to think about, well, what do we do? Because again, it's just like your home budget. You can put things off and you can pay the minimum on things, but at some point, you're gonna have to make those larger investments. And so again, that's not saying that it's this year, because we're saying that we have a plan to get by. It may not even be next year, but at some point, these issues will not be able to be pushed down the road any further. And so at that point, what we want folks to understand is we have been along doing everything we can with the budget that we have and being as austere as we can with that budget. But there will come a point when we're gonna need more than what is in here to maintain the quality of education that the community expects to deliver to its children, and for the recruitment and retention of faculty and staff. So there's that piece. Then we go into the 5-year actual capital outlay plan, and in here we have laid out, well, how far out can we extend some of these expenses? What do we have to do now, and what can we put off for a couple of years? And in there you'll see, again, under the main headlines, maintenance, food service, etc., what we have laid out. And again, I go back to and challenge you all to say that there's nothing in here that isn't essential. We're talking about equipment, we're talking about things that are nuts and bolts for operating the school system. We're talking about roofs, we're talking about HVAC systems. And so, again, we're talking about storm shelters, we're talking about things that are an absolute necessity for running the schools. And we have taken out things that could possibly be frivolous. So it is, again, a pretty straightforward, bare bones budget. At the end, at the very bottom, you'll see these grand totals. So that tells you, earlier, I think I mentioned we have about $2.187 million. Well, you can see, if you look to 22, 2023, 24, and so forth, how much of that we've already had earmarked for something that needs to be fixed or improved. And so again, it just shows you that the scope is tight. So we don't have a ton of wiggle room, but it's one of those where you're crossing all your fingers, crossing all your toes, and you're saying your prayers, because we want to make sure that everything has to go right for this plan to work. One thing that I did want to take a moment to point out is I showed you that plan, but then also know that in the background, we're working on even more detail than what's in here. And what I have in front of you right now, and I know you can't see it very well, but is essentially the ETC, what we need for technology. And what I want to really emphasize with this is, I know this is common sense to you all, so I'm sorry for patronizing here, but our school is going to continue to rely more and more on technology. If this year showed us anything, it was that we have a heavy reliance on technology, that's where we're going to have to be. So, but technology is pretty expensive. If you're thinking about Chromebooks, that you're needing to replace them every 4 years, talking about staff computers like the one I have here that's already 4 years old, this needs to be replaced. And Sheila, sometimes the battery doesn't work on it, but we can go down the whole list and say, we just know that there has to be a replacement schedule, that these things have to be replaced. And on top of that, looking out at the other things such as projectors, cameras, all of those things that within the body of the school, they need to function and to be modern and to deliver that education. So what it's going to mean over the next several years is an increase in what we have to expend for technology just to keep things replaced. So if you're, like right now, I think we've allocated to Brenda's group about $5.25, so $525,000. That's probably the lowest it's going to be able to be from here on out. And even there, I know she's sitting back there, she would tell you this isn't near what she needs, because her initial request was well over this. And so, again, we're working with staff to get it down to what we absolutely think we can handle. But when you're talking about dealing with machines and expecting them to last 6, 7 years, that's getting a little bit on the realm of that's not realistic. And so, again, not saying that we do anything tonight to change it, this is our plan, we're gonna be able to stick to it, but just know that here in the next couple of years, we're going to have to look at this, just like some of the maintenance issues, and say, how can we come up with the funding that we need to purchase and maintain the technology that's gonna keep us competitive, that's gonna keep us being able to deliver on what the students need. And so, with that, I'll pretty much stop talking, because I think there's a lot in here that you could ask questions about, and so I welcome those, and again, I'll try to answer as best I can, but overall, it's a pretty straightforward picture. We're doing what we can with what we're given. We're not expecting a lot of growth in terms of revenue sources from our traditional sources, so it's, again, how do we think about that and strategize of where we're going to allocate funding so that has the most impact for our students.
On page 4, we have a few items that are in the deny column. Does that mean they're automatically set for next year, or will people have to request those expenses again?
They'd have to request them again, so if they're in the deny column, they're completely off the table for capital outlay.
But if there's a difference between the cost and the approved column, then those are in more of the 5-year plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
I try to as much as I can. Some of it, you might see where it's more money one year and less the next, because when I was talking like with our maintenance folks, they're like, well, I can't roof half the roof. I have to do it, I have to do it all, and so then we try to break it up by building.
And can you give us a general overview of our HVAC systems and kind of what we're planning to tackle in the next couple of years?
I can, Fred, you might have to help me with this, but ultimately, we have HVAC systems which are pretty old. At the high school, they still have the old pneumatic systems which run off the air pressure, and so those date back to the 70s. And then here in this building as well, we have some 70s units running. And so there's a lot of, that I think it's correct to say, any can was pushed down the road. That and technology were the ones that really got pushed. And so that's kind of our biggest areas where we're hurting in. But essentially, we're looking at, several millions of dollars worth of replacement. The high school alone is a $1 million price tag to fix that HVAC system. So Fred and I have been working on looking at grants, looking at this ESSER 2 money, that's what it's called, to see if we can get that to fit in, and thereby, even if we got $1 million of that and put it like towards the high school, then that would free up some money in our capital outlay budget that we could use to fund other things. And so it's a big need, but it is one, at least specifically with HVAC, there possibly could be some outside help coming our way. But it's nothing guaranteed, but we are looking at all that. But I would say overall, which is the high school alone at $1 million, then you're probably close, probably close to that $10 million range, just in HVAC needs alone.
Do you know how much we have earmarked for next year for HVAC needs?
I have the high school, we're making an assumption that we can probably get that through ESSER money.
There are quite a few line items that say HVAC, like
Right.
their Chisholm HVAC and pods.
Right.
555, I think it's what it says there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that approved?
No, it's
We're approving 185,
We're
because
approving
that's,
185.
so that's at Chisholm, and you're more familiar with it, but they can do a pod for 185. So one of your pods is gonna replace its HVAC next year, and then we're gonna go pod by pod until we can get them all. But again, ideally, in working with the contractors and what the school needs, you replace them all, because Chris, who's here in maintenance, would say they're all just as old as the other one. So you're just, so we're replacing one and we're hoping the other two keep working.
Or we engage in some sort of an outside financing, I don't want to say organization, that's not correct. Outside financing opportunity, whether it's through an energy audit type of a thing, or even some other mechanisms where we can use some of those ESSER funds as the seed money. Because we're gonna get about $2 million in the ESSER 2, and there's supposed to be maybe some ESSER 3 coming that will also provide some infrastructure for school. If we can utilize those funds, we would actually then have some more wiggle room in capital outlay this year in terms of those actual costs, to be able to help out with the technology in some other areas that we can't do right now. When we look at the technology, one of the biggest issues we're gonna have is when you look at Brenda's list, and people will say it's a wish list, it's really not. When you look at these computers that are already 5 and 6 years old, you're not gonna get 2 years more use out of them, more than likely, just the way that we use the things. And that doesn't necessarily even include some of the Chromebooks and things of that nature, and some other standalone labs in other buildings. So like right now, this year, just to upgrade the computers that we need to upgrade, that's about $675,000 or so. Looking at next year, it's about $1,049,000 or something like that, if we were to be able to replace all this. We don't have that room in our dollars. We can't do it that way. So we've got to try to take those other funds and work with some outside entities to kind of help us figure out ways that we can leverage that to get more HVAC immediately to make those changes. And then we could use some of those capital outlay streams over the course of the next 2 years, and hopefully that would kind of make our payments, so to speak. So I'm oversimplifying that tremendously, but those are some of the things that we're looking at to try to leverage that.
And I know Brenda, did you have some comments about the tech piece?
Yes, I don't want to correct the superintendent in front of everyone.
Oh, please do. Nobody else has a problem doing it, Brenda.
But I want to make
Oh,
sure.
1,150 now.
This year, we should be replacing almost $1.4 million in laptops.
I'm just looking at what we had looked at this afternoon with
Right.
647 and then the 159.
But we will do the 525.
Yes.
So then you can see that situation that we continue to be in, not just with technology, but in, with HVAC and other things, then that means we have more than half of our student and staff laptops, not Chromebooks, that will need to be replaced next year, but then we also have Chromebooks that will need to be replaced, and specialized laptops for PLTW at Chisholm and engineering at the high school, and desktops that need to be replaced.
So we have a maintenance plan, but it is not a plan that's gonna drive us forward. It's definitely very much a how do we maintain, and how do we keep the doors open? How do we do the minimum that we can to deliver the education? So again, it's not a crisis for this year, but it is one that we need to do our due diligence and make sure you're aware that there will be a time when we need to address these pretty straightforward with other sources of funding.
And there's also some other things within capital outlay itself. We need to reserve enough wiggle room that we may need to shift, like we talked about during negotiations, shift some maintenance salaries over there in order to be able to give the raises. Because that was one of the things we said this year, if we had to, we did have some capital outlay room within there in terms of the actual dollars themselves. If at the end of the year we had to shift some of those expenses over there, those maintenance salaries. So the pie's only that big, and we're doing the best we can. What I like what David's trying to do is partition that out over time, but sometimes you can't buy a half of an HVAC unit, right? So you have to kind of look, maybe this year we don't buy that HVAC unit, but we set aside those dollars, and know that next year it'll be double that, things of that nature.
And you've already heard, I think Joey or someone else said, but, and to Fred's credit, is that, we're trying as best we can too, and he's kind of put out that edict, hey, really think about the FTEs. Do you need that? Do you need that person? Is there another way we can do it? And so we are asking the staff and the schools to sacrifice as well, and to really look at it and say, how can you help us keep this as trim as possible? So everyone's got their hands in this, everyone's on board, and we're just trying to get through what we think is gonna be a pretty tight year.
Are there any other questions? Comments? I appreciate the details, you've lined out. We haven't had that in, all the recent years. We started to see that in the past couple of years, but I think that is so helpful for our community to see what we're doing, what our plan is. It's good for transparency, so I appreciate all of the details and the plans that we put in place. student-parent tech use agreement.
This is something that we need to put in place because we have a 5-6 right now, but we really didn't have a K through 4. So Brenda's gone through that and developed a draft that you guys can consider to be put into the enrollment process for this upcoming school year. So if you have any questions about that, if you want to download that thing and then take a look at it, if you have any questions, we will be more than happy. Brenda will be more than happy to answer any of those questions. Since he threw me under the bus, she's gonna get the time. Actually, technically, I wasn't incorrect based upon what our conversation was this afternoon, but that's okay, when I look at the dollars.
Is this basically the same agreement that we have with our older students?
It's a little bit.
Yes, so there's a major difference in a usual year, we don't send devices home with kids. So Chisholm and the high school looks a little different because there's a tech fee involved and they go home all the time. We did have to put something together last spring and then again this fall when we knew devices were going home. So parents did sign that, but it was not a already established, this is, you know, for K through 6. We had to do something in the moment so parents could have and kids could have devices. So yes, it mirrors what 5-6 would have had before. The only thing that was added is the remote learning part, just in case we, you know, are in remote learning in next year at some point, so.
Bye, Chief.
I know. No, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
So you get the door frame. Thank you for that, Brenda.
Yes.
Okay, summit learning discussion.
This is probably why we have the crowd this evening, I'll bet you. And not to make light of this, Summit Learning has been on the discussion since about October here, at the end of October, when we first started talking about it. And we thought now would be as good a time as any to have that discussion. I asked the two principals, that's why they're at the table up there, to be involved in that discussion. Their APs are behind there. If you have any questions, you can direct towards them. This is a source of consternation in among a lot of parents that you all get feedback from, positively, but mainly negatively from what I understand. And so, you know, we're just gonna kind of start out however you folks want to go about this in terms of having this discussion, and I'll try to follow you along as best I can. But we've also got the two principals here from the buildings and the APs to answer any questions you might have. So.
Okay. And before we get started, I just want to make a couple of quick comments that even though this meeting is open to the public, it is not a meeting of the public per se. And since we do have our admins that have given up a lot of time today, after a long day, I'm sure, to be with us, let's maybe try to direct our questions toward them. I know they don't have the answers tonight. I'm confident that they will get them and get back to us. And then just my personal thoughts, I know this is being live streamed on Facebook and I appreciate the transparency with that, but I know this is a hot topic and I just ask that comments and feedback be respectful to our district staff. As a board member, you can say whatever you'd like to me, but please be respectful to our staff. So I will open the floor for questions, comments.
And I'm going to preface this by saying I've talked to a lot of different parents, so this is from their view, and some teachers, not doing teachers, but they're mostly parents at this point. So, my first question is the lack of deadlines of Summit. Parents, a lot of them are parents of boys, are having difficulty with the lack of hard deadlines. So, how does that translate into high school where they're going to have a deadline, they're going to have a due date, and with Summit we see you have the whole entire school year to get your assignments turned in?
So even though students have the whole year to complete their work, there's still what's called the blue pacing line. And so things do come due as the year progresses, just like they would in any other class. And so once, like say a project has a specific due date, and that's in the Summit platform, what date that's due. If it has not been completed after, I believe it's 1 week, the teachers do enter a 0 for that project, so it does affect the student's grade. The difference is that they are always able to go back and complete that and get full credit for that assignment. And that's because a big philosophy behind Summit is the idea of mastery learning and making sure that the students really do understand the material rather than just, well, I didn't complete it, we're gonna move on whether you actually learned it or not. So there is still that idea of a pacing line and things that are due, just like in a normal class. But the focus is also on making sure that the students actually learn the content, which is why they're allowed to also go back and work on it again.
And also with that, they can also go in and improve upon what they're doing. So they do have the deadlines, and the teachers do enforce that, like this is when it's due. And we follow the same kind of the procedures, putting some things in place for the zeros. But it's again, working towards the knowledge base, understanding the content, and not just moving on.
And I'll just kind of follow up with that question, if you don't mind. So a few parents I've talked to were a little bit concerned just that their kids were memorizing it after taking the test so many times and not actually absorbing the information, since there was a hard, time that you had to learn it by. It was just kind of a cumulative knowledge, it just wasn't moving. What do you guys, what's your thoughts on that?
As far as memorizing like.
Well, that they weren't actually absorbing the information, that it was more, they took it enough times where they finally got it right.
I mean, I think that would be the same with any other class too. If they were taking a normal class and they took a test multiple times, that they would face the same sort of challenges, I would say. And I'd say even also, even if they are taking it multiple times, which we try to minimize that to make sure that they're learning it first before they take like a content assessment. Even if they are, they're still absorbing some information, some of the material by doing that, by reviewing it more than once. And then like if I read a section and I don't understand it, I'll read it 2 or 3 or 4 times before I really understand and absorb it. So I think they're still learning even if they are going through it multiple times.
You have protocols in place, don't you, in order to take a content assessment, they just don't step up to the plate and swing. Right?
That's correct, right. So they don't just take it, multiple times without having other things in place and supports by teachers.
And there's a bank of questions, so it's not just only 10 questions, and so, but I mean, the protocols, and again, I think that's we acknowledge there's room for improvement, and even as a staff, working on what can we be more consistent about from class to class, from grade to grade, and then now building to building, because the 4 of us are trying really hard to work close together and because we feed into Chisholm feeds in, we all feed into each other, so it's important that we're working together. But I think it's what we're doing, not just taking the test multiple times, and it's looking at and understanding that maybe they didn't pass it, then what do? We workshop, or we do some of that direct instruction before they do it again, versus maybe in a traditional classroom, they would have the question, they take the test either they failed it or not. We want to make sure they're going to that mastery so that they're understanding that the 8 out of 10 to be able to move on. So, and again, it's not just 10 questions. There's a ton of questions.
So maybe for the sake of the audience listening at home and parents that are here, can you maybe go through those protocols, kind of step by step?
So at Santa Fe, we've worked on trying to work on putting some protocols in place so we are more consistent. And so we're always fine-tuning those, but they shouldn't be taking, one of the things that I heard fairly early in the year was they would take a content assessment like 5 times. And then they finally pass it, or more. Well, so, we put some things in place, and actually the teachers got together and they put into place what they wanted the protocol to be, so they shouldn't be taking it more than twice. And then at that point, then they have to communicate with Heidi or myself to discuss and to go through, hey, what do we need to do differently? What are we, workshopping looks a little bit different too, because, with COVID protocols, in the very beginning, we couldn't have small groups, and so that was a challenge, so trying to figure out how to work around that. for this year. But they need to make sure that, with that, we have a flow chart. So that way we had that visual to go, we targeted 2 areas, and it was the content assessments and it was SDL. We tried to come up with, so that we were all being consistent, because something that we saw is we weren't always being consistent about some of those things. And I think that is also not necessarily a curriculum thing, that's an implementation thing on our end, and looking at how we can get better. So we made those flow charts, so that way the teachers have them. And then they workshop and, work with the student, talk to the student to make sure they're ready before they take it in, instead of the, thought process of they're just sitting there and taking it multiple times. You know, what are our steps as the educator in the classroom? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, when did you implement the protocols? When did you start doing that?
SDL started later, with the protocol, but we started, content was right at the very beginning after our plan as a group, the teachers kind of got together. We were there too, but trying to come up with being more consistent.
So was that in October when we first talked about it, you guys got together, or before?
No, that was in September. I mean, before we started school, August, sorry, before we started school.
Yeah, and at Chisholm, we have similar protocols. It starts with the diagnostic, which is kind of like a practice or a pre-test for students. And they need to take that first. And then they take the content assessment. They can take that twice and have that approved by any SDL teacher, so any teacher that has a self-directed learning class. The third time, if they did not pass the content assessment on the first or the second time, the third time is when they visit with that content teacher and go over what they need to as far as making a plan to try to pass it on the third time. And if they don't pass it the third time, then they continue to meet with that content teacher, with the content teacher providing different supports and trying to find different ways to help the student learn that material before they take the content assessment again.
Does the teacher have access to the questions that they missed? I know the kids do not know, they could be covering different sections, and they're not sure which questions they missed, does the teacher have the access to that information?
Yeah.
So they can go over
Yeah, I think
before
the
that
teacher
third
can
time?
look and see exactly how the student answered each question on the content assessment.
The students can though see by the objective, which objectives they were efficient on in their, in preparation for their content assessment. They can't see the questions, but they can see the objectives and know what resources to look for.
And were your protocols in place at the very beginning of the year as well?
They were, yeah.
There's an anomaly that I hear often. I met with a couple dozen families over the last three weeks away back after our first meeting. And I reached out and I had no idea what I was getting myself into, to be quite frank with you. But I learned a lot and I heard a lot, and 80% of them were pretty gracious. But there were some that weren't. But you're gonna have that in anything you do, especially when you get numbers behind it, right? But I hear this thing where there's something 10 times or 15 times. Is that stopping that, or why is that still being talked about now with the protocols in place?
I don't know why it's still being talked about. I know we had one issue early in the first 9 weeks, but I think we figured that out and fixed it pretty quickly. So without going in and looking at each student and how many times they take a different content assessments, I can't think of examples where students are taking it 10 or more times or even close to that. I could be wrong, but that should not be occurring.
I heard that from multiple families, so I'm trying to narrow this down.
Andy, were they saying that was happening this year, or does that happen in their previous years?
That's a good question. I have their names, so I'll follow up with that, just to figure out what our systems are and how we're doing that.
And please feel free to tell them to reach out to their administrator or their teacher is really where it needs to start. But if not, reach out to us so that we can look into that and find those things as well. And problem solve together.
And I think along those lines, Andy, some of the things that I heard, and have experienced in our house is the stress and anxiety that it kind of builds. So I guess the question I would have, what are we doing to reduce the stress and anxiety that impacts our kids and our families?
So,
And I know you guys are all new to the position, so I guess we should say that at the beginning, that these administrators are new, to leading the buildings, at the highest level. So I know you guys are still learning, we have some new staff that are learning, I understand all that, but this, stress and anxiety is a huge thing that I've heard.
Real quick, you guys are new to the buildings and also new to Summit. Both of you have never used Summit before?
so I was assistant principal last year, so I had gone through the summit training, but
You never taught with it.
I had never taught with it, no, I was an orchestra teacher, so I was on the outside looking in with summit.
And even as an assistant, you probably weren't as hands-on
That's
last
correct.
year. So this
Right.
is your first year to be the guy.
That's right.
I have an example of that. So one of them, and this is, I know there's layers, but one of them, that I've heard often actually, another reoccurring thing is this line that goes down, and I know some kids are like, my son would freak out, right? He's just an anxious dude anyways. So what is this, and me and Joey kind of bantered a little bit about this when I met with you a couple weeks ago. Could you explain that, or in the kids' view, I think there was some funny vernacular that you guys heard, terms that y'all guys got internally on that one?
Yeah, so it's called the blue pacing line, but the students call it the blue line of death. They call it that Santa Fe too?
So it gets around.
But, I mean, it kind of alludes to the earlier question about due dates, is that it does create that sense of urgency for students, to make sure that they are completing things on time. I think that the difference and the thing that stresses everyone out is that content, those due dates, that pacing line, that's always been there, even with traditional classes. It's just that now you can see it in real time and all in one place. And so that, for some students, that does create some additional stress, because it seems very overwhelming when you look at it. But that's always been there, all throughout the years of education, knowing that we need to get through this amount of material and these specific standards. The difference is it's a visual reference now of that sense of urgency to complete work. But going back to your question as far as what we've done, we have, Summit does have the weekly mentor check-ins. So we have worked with our teachers to try to make sure that they are really trying to be in tune with the students. And then if there are any issues that they see that arise as far as stress level or specific needs for those students, teachers do direct those students, or they reference our counselor and our social worker to follow up with those students and check in with them and make sure that everything is okay. So that's one way that we're helping to relieve the stress. Also, some of the things we've done with our workshop Wednesdays, where we're trying to work in smaller groups, which is another part of Summit, to help those students get the information, help them feel like they're understanding the material and getting caught up. We've also really encouraged a lot of our students to do regular power hour after school, which is, it goes from 3:30 to 5 o'clock each day. And you have teachers and parents who are there to help students, and also provides a quiet space for them to work on getting their work completed. And that, a lot of students have taken advantage of that and found that to be very helpful when they feel like they're overwhelmed and really behind. They've been able to utilize that time to help get some work done and get caught up.
One thing that, I came from a district where we had Summit Learning, and we had a lot of those same issues there. One of the things that we did in terms of that line of depth was that we actually created semester-long courses. And so the kid didn't see the whole year, they just saw what was in, essentially, that grading term. That helped out a little bit. Also on the platform, they can zoom in or zoom out in terms of expanding that. It's a mind trip, but they don't see all of it there. But sometimes that was enough of a thing to do, of an adjustment to where the kids just didn't freak out as much. Because like Joey said before, teachers would have maybe a syllabus in their mind, these are the assignments that I've always done, but nobody ever saw them before. And now they're all there. And you have some kids that are perfectionists, which is a positive and a negative, obviously. But in this kind of a case, then all they wanna do is get finished. They wanna get finished, there's another task to do, because it's out in front of them. So those are things that, you know, from a self-regulation perspective in teaching, that can be helpful for kids.
And I would also say that having the students in the building 5 days a week, already within the first week, I think it's been positive for our students being able to be with the teacher each day and being able to have that solid time and not having to try to connect online through a Google Meet has already helped with our students as far as stress levels, I think, and that's just gonna continue to improve as far as, at least I hope it is.
So was the blue line originally the red line?
I don't think.
When we were in our first experience in it, we had a green and a yellow and a red. And you never wanted to move, you didn't want to be in yellow or red. So is that the same thing that we're talking about now?
The assignments, if it goes past and you have not turned it in, then they'll turn red. You know, like if they didn't do that in, so that it identifies, the line is blue, and I don't believe, I did turn around to look at the teachers that have done it longer. But the line has been blue, but they still turn yellow and red. So on your child's platform, if they're, you know, blue, there's different colors. It's also that visual piece to let them know, hey, you still need to get this done because the due date has passed. And even if it's a 0, it will still say red because that is that visual for you to go back and work on. So you will also have students who'll be like, oh, I'm done, I'm all caught up. Well, let me see your platform, you know, let's pull it up. Oh, no, you've got some reds over here, we can go back and work on that, you know. But, I mean, the big key and difference in, I've used a lot of different curriculums, is the mentoring piece that Summit does provide. And it is huge, and that does help the anxiety piece of it. I will say, I think with remote learning, again, haven't seen Summit done other years, but this year, it was very stressful and overwhelming for students that maybe the remote learning was not a successful place for them, potentially. And they let things, they dug themselves into a hole because they didn't get things done. And so then it's really hard to try to figure out, they're still kids. So we have to then help them, how do we help them get through that, which is something that you would do in a traditional curriculum as well. I mean, you've got to still come up with a plan to help those students that are struggling learners, that aren't turning in homework or getting failing grades. You know, I mean, that's why we're in education, is to help those students. But the mentoring piece is, it's a time for the teacher. Santa Fe has the mentoring done a little bit different this year because we were between so many modes, you know, and we would move back and forth. But it's nice to just stand back and listen to the teacher and the students sit there and have really good conversations and getting the child to see, instead of it just being the teacher telling them, turn this in. We're really trying to get the students to own their learning too, so that they can be more successful when they get older, which is a switch, trying to get the students to be, it's student-centered. But a due date never comes up. I mean, it kind of ties into a couple of questions. The due dates never come up and a student didn't know they were coming. I mean, because there's been multiple things to talk through that. But the mentoring piece is huge in just checking in and seeing how they're feeling, how they're doing. But again, that's a different challenge with remote, or, you know, when we were in hybrid too.
I'm just concerned about the whole mentoring, process from the data that we got at the last board meeting. And what kind of questions during mentoring are they being asked? Are they closed in, open end? And how much time are they spending with the students? Because I have some families saying they're not getting mentored time.
Okay. So mentoring is different for Santa Fe this year than it has the previous 2 years. We did go on a bi-weekly. Some teachers are still doing weekly, but some are bi-weekly. So again, our percentages, when you pull it, it does within 7 days. So it's not like we can switch it to every other. Part of that was they had By keeping them in cohorts, it was the classroom teacher with the whole class, and with our class sizes going up to 25 students, if you do the math, that's a lot of time too, so we were trying to spread it out. And then you can have anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes, and I've seen some even spend 10 minutes. It's based on what the students need and what they're working through. Some it does have questions that you can answer, but a lot of times it's just making sure that they're, like, where are they at in their platform, and asking what they need, and what are we gonna do next, you know,
So if you
just
have a
discussions.
student, if you have a student that's on track and, you know, on time with everything, how does that mentoring process work? Are they still getting that same amount of mentoring, even though they're caught up and they're not behind having to work on things? Or is the mentoring meant for the ones that are having a little more difficult time?
So for those students, I mean, it's still looking for what are you gonna do next? What's your next game plan? I mean, because you're processing through what your next steps are. But there are guided questions for each of your mentoring times that Summit has. So if you don't have specific, like what you're behind on or any of those kinds of questions, you can set those goals, and the kids are always setting goals for what they're gonna work for the next week during those times.
And do parents have access to that mentoring time? Do they get notified on that mentoring time, or is that just student teacher?
As a parent, I can see mentoring if I go into my kids, I log in as my kiddos, and I can scroll through and see what they've done each day, and I will see mentoring, and it will tell me the amount of time, who they mentored with, and depending on the teacher, it will include notes about what they talked about.
So if somebody is behind, is the teacher contacting, are there protocols in place to contact the parent to let them know that they have that they're behind in several areas, or are we not doing that because they have the whole year to get that done?
So at Chisholm, our teachers, we have our SDL class, our self-directed learning class, and that's the teacher that does the mentoring with that student. And it's scheduled, for the most part, at the same time each week. And so, I know you asked about our mentoring numbers being down a little bit in the recent data, and that's partially because we've had a number of not full weeks of school. We had a 3-day week and then a couple of 4-day weeks. And so that means that if there's a student who misses school on Monday, then we usually, a lot of times, unless they can make it up, which is sometimes hard because of the tight schedule, might miss a week of mentoring because of those shorter weeks. So, like our most recent numbers, we have 70% who have had a check-in in the last 2 weeks with an average check-in length of 7 minutes. And usually, Summit kind of says it usually goes around 10 minutes or so, but again, it really depends on the teacher and the student. Some students really open up and want to talk about a lot of different things. Some students don't want to be as open, and so the mentoring time might not go quite as long. And it really is tailored to the student and what the student needs. So if the focus needs to be on academics, then that's what they can do. If it's more of a social emotional and the student and the teacher need to talk about something to help encourage the student, then it can be that. It really depends upon the student and the teacher. And then, yeah, you can see that, the parent can see when they met with their mentor, and it should be mainly scheduled weekly. I don't think the teachers send a specific email to the parent that says this is the weekly mentor time for your student, but it is like the student should know it's about the same time every week.
So if parents wanted to check in on those mentoring, where would they go?
So they can look in the platform on the main progress page, and it'll show each week, like, student met with their mentor for 7 minutes.
Is that parent view or student view?
The parent view and the student view, my understanding is they're exactly the same. The only difference is the parents cannot edit the student work.
And that was my recollection too from years past, that, you know, just for the audience out there to kind of know if they're not sure where to go and they're listening in, so.
Well, and I think that to add on to that, you know, in our discussions moving forward, is we can make this our own and make it Newton and what we want it to look like, and I think the mentoring piece is a great way to do that. I mean, yes, they have the questions and things like that, but if we wanna set and have our, you know, specific what our purposes and have procedures. We don't have set procedures for the mentoring time right now. It's kind of like was the next piece that we were gonna work on, because we're taking chunks at a time and getting stronger in areas. We can do is, take new lessons, take things, add it to the Summit platform, and that also could be with the mentoring piece as well.
And maybe this is a question for you, Fred, but in teacher discussions, we have heard in the past, that they weren't allowed to make adaptations to benefit the kids. So can we talk a little bit about if that's a misconception, or we know more now than we did then situation?
I don't know, maybe they got that from a previous administration or something. I can't tell you where that information came. All I can tell you.
But they can do that.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Now, one of the things that Summit does tell you when you're first starting out is they suggest that you follow the base curriculum. Because if you're doing this well, it's really a heavy lift for teachers. What they're having to do is a lot different than what they ever had to engage in before because of the data-rich environment and things like that. In my previous district, we did, you know, actually try to, we tried to incentivize, frankly, to where they could actually have exemplar projects that were created so kids would know what a great project was. They would adapt lessons to where there was actually direct instruction being set up for those power focus areas within each one of those objectives. A lot of it asynchronous so that kids could move ahead on their own and things of that nature. So those things are always an option, you know, but it's a matter of our system here understanding that yes, we can do that. Because I've heard some folks say, yeah, we can, then I've heard some folks say, no, we were told we can't do that way. So all I can tell you is, yeah, we can. It's just that my biggest fear with any of this stuff is I think we have some teachers that do a great job with it, and some teachers, frankly, that don't do a great job, okay? And if you don't have consistency on the important pieces of that, like the mentoring, like making sure we have consistent protocols with those power focus areas in terms of content assessments, and how you can take them, or how many times and what kind of interventions need to be put in place, then all we're gonna hear are the terrible stories that come from this. And because they'll be real. Because you'll have some folks that aren't doing it with efficacy, and it makes the whole thing look like it's just trash. And it's only as good as how we do it collectively as a system, which is really unfortunate. But you'll hear all the bad things, and it's not, you know, I don't remember ever enjoying taking tests before. I don't remember ever enjoying having to learn hard things either. But I don't remember my teachers ever asking me, do you like your chemistry textbook? You know, so that's one of the things when we talk about this, it is a big shift. And when we talk about things like power focus areas and stuff and those content assessments, remember, that's a small part of the grade. The bigger part of the grade is the project because it's a weighted grading system. And that's where they should be spending a lot of their time. That's where a lot of the direct instruction should be taking place. So there are issues, they're fixable, but are they? You know, do we have enough faith in the platform to allow that to happen? And that's why we're talking here tonight. Because my goal was to get through this year, just based upon it being a COVID year, and we work on these things towards this spring, and we just are where we are because of the issues that we have. So, and it's good to have this discussion. It really is.
And I would say last year was our first year building wide implementing it at Chisholm. And so our teachers had just gone through the 1 week of training in the summertime, and so they were still trying to learn the platform and understand how it all works and how the different pieces of Summit are structured. And so then this year has been a COVID year, which we've been focused on safety measures and some of the things that we did last year as far as being able to have students go back and forth between classrooms to get additional help and support. We haven't done this year because we didn't want to intermix students. So that piece has been missing that we would like to do in the future again, as far as like helping students get more workshop time and small group support when they need it with their specific content teacher. But you know, this has been a different year as far as, trying to make it through the entire year with, having not completed the entire first year with Summit. And so going into year 3, that's a really good opportunity to, now we know what's in Summit, we know how it works, we're starting to develop some consistency between the buildings, or at least have conversations about that. And so that kind of gives us, we know what we need to work on, and so we certainly can start working towards that and improving that.
Well, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I'm just gonna say one last thing and give somebody else a chance to talk. But when you go to the Summit webpage and you look at all the things that they have to offer, I think most of our families are of the same mindset that those things have not taken place. And that's not on your guys' shoulders because you're, new. But we can't have our families feeling like they're not getting what they were promised in a platform. And we can't have our 8th graders' families giving up midway through the year because we just gotta get through it because next year we don't have it at the high school. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the mental and stress levels of that, and, do we have enough time and do we have enough capacity to turn the corner? So that's kind of where I'm at when I'm thinking about this, and waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and emailing Fred questions. So that's kind of my mindset.
So I have some more questions, and I like to start with end in mind, right? So like the data, Santa Fe and Chisholm, we were to approach our parents and say, where are we at with Santa Fe from the numbers that we had last time to now, where are we at? And then with Chisholm, same question. So how does that look? How are we looking now?
So you mean like numbers from last year this time to this, are you talking about that?
Or what's our
from-
success rate? Kids are doing a good job.
So, the data is always changing, just because it's live, so like when I pull it, because that was also a discussion that we had, like if I pull some data and I send it in my board report, but then when I pull it for staff on a different day, they're not the same. And trying to do that. But, in looking, I was able to reach out to, Summit and get what it was a year ago, and then what it is today for both of our buildings. And, overall, we've made improvements in quite a few areas, when you're looking at the data. And projects has been one of our biggest, goals that we've been targeting as a building, because that is 80% of our grade. So that if we, that's where a lot of the percentage is for your grades, because we don't want failing grades, and so we've been doing a lot with that. So for instance, today we have, overall 89% projects are on track. So, everybody has, 89% of the students have everything, they're where they're supposed to be.
And how
Nothing's
dramatic
behind.
does that change?
How dramatic does that change? So on my report, like, I'll have, and sometimes so here's the deal, when you look at that, like right now, it looks awesome. Then I could get it the next week and it might be low because something came due.
And what's the
Or, so it could move to like, let's see, like 50, let's see, overall was like 52%.
From the last time we met to now, what's that trend look like as far as average?
I don't have it worked out for an average. I can definitely do that for you and get
Yeah,
that
I'm just curious to see
information.
where we're at, and how about Chisholm, where are we at?
So for Chisholm, we had a really big push at the end of the first semester to get work done and completed. And so we had a project on track average of 82%, so 82% were all turned in. And then within 2 weeks, as new projects came due after the semester, it dropped down to 28%. And so now students are completing work again, and we're back on an upward swing. So last Friday it was back up to 50%. And if that's kind of the way the year progresses, is as projects come due, it'll drop because it seems like students don't believe us that it will actually affect their grade until that actually is entered into the grade book. And so when they see that it's affected their grades, then they work on getting it turned in. And so then you'll see it go back up, and then the next set of projects will come due, it'll drop back down, and then the trend will go back up again. So we had a drop, and now we're back on the upward trend.
So for instance, like this time last year, in a non-COVID year, it was 66% for Santa Fe, but today it's 89. I mean, it's.
Yeah, that's awesome, but that's the part, I think, where some of my families that I met with, and of course, you're probably gonna get the ones that really have a bone to pick. I get that, you know what I mean? We understand, I totally understand that, that's a lot of levels, but some of them really, I think, were just concerned. A lot of them, actually, I think 60% of them were just concerned. When you look at the people and how they were interacting and how, you know, our conversations were going. And so when you say, I have to sell that to them, right? And they ask me, well, how is everybody else doing? And I'm not really sure what that looks like, and that doesn't look good on us either. And at the end of the day, this is interesting to me, right? I guess we got this deal here, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. And it says the fifth graders that we took a little sampling here. So data for 135 fifth graders, students across 6 classrooms. And then reading the questions, that's cool. When did we do this survey?
May I have Hannah? Hi. Hannah's the one that did that. That's up to you, or can you ask?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You were kind of.
I don't want to speak incorrectly.
Do I stay here? Is that okay?
You can.
So that was actually today. Those are the 6 classrooms that were able to take the survey. It's actually a much larger survey that has a lot more information. I would be happy to share with you guys all of the details that I got from it. Those are just some key points I wanted to add to the letter.
Okay.
And they were basically presented with that sentence and chose agree, neutral, disagree. So those were the kind of key points that I took away from it, and a couple other teachers that when we were looking over the data.
So you have a copy of the survey you gave them?
Mm-hmm.
Can I
Yeah,
check
I
that
can send it
out?
to you, it's a Google form.
Awesome.
I'd be happy to send it to all of you, and you can look at the data from it.
Okay. And then did we do anything for the 6th grade at all?
No,
No, we didn't do that.
it did not survey this. I can send it
I'd
to
be
the 6th
curious to
grader.
see what that looks like in 5th and 6th. The 5th graders are newer, right?
Mhm.
5th and 6th grade. I'd be curious to see that. And also, are we sending that out to the parents too, so we can get their feedback on how they feel about because there's some kind of a disconnect, and this is for me, right? And maybe it's because I'm hitting the parents that are hitting me up that maybe some of them have an agenda, some of them are upset, some of them are legit, you know, because we've heard a lot of different stuff, and I'm just trying to understand, right? And that's my job, is to understand, and then to bring their voice in and try to get this stuff put together.
So, at Santa Fe, we have, it's not a district level, kind of like, you know, we have curriculum committees district level wise, it's just within the building, and when I arrived, I saw there was kind of a core group of teachers that were kind of involved in a lot of different things, so I tried to spread the wealth, and everybody had a piece of the pie. And so we do have a summit committee, which the purpose of that group of teachers is just to sit and look at data or talk about, hey, what do we need to work on? They help with the procedures for different things that we put in place as well. And so they send a survey out to the teachers at the very beginning of the year. And so that's something that we could bring, to the table, of the survey that Hannah did, I think was something that a couple of the teachers just got together and did. So it wasn't necessarily a building-wide thing, not against it. We definitely could do, look at some of those things with kids too.
Okay.
And-
Yeah, because.
And parents, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I would like to
Whenever-
learn and understand and this was done today, you started putting this together.
This morning.
Oh, okay.
My plan was to go ahead and adapt it for parents as well, because I've had super positive feedback from my group of parents.
Right on, awesome.
In my classroom, so I was planning to do that as well. I did this with my content team this morning, and then we did it with our respective classes.
Okay.
And I just gathered it really quickly. It was,
Yeah.
one of those last minute things, but something I thought was important.
Okay, cool. So I wanna see a correlation, because we had a good conversation about 2 weeks ago. I really appreciated the time, Joey, and thank you for your graciousness to showing me around the buildings. I'm looking forward to doing more of that. I know we've got a time, we're setting up here soon. But if, I would like to match this with like parents, and then figure out, because there seems like the parents aren't coming at you guys like they are, at me at least, because I put myself out there and I'll say it, and that's all good, but it was a little bit harsh to have to go through those meetings. And I know I met with Fred, and I told you, Fred, that I was gonna bring some parents in, and I was gonna hear how you did your thing, and then I was gonna verbatim try to do the same thing you were doing with everybody I was meeting, but after about 10 of them, I was like, I can't do that to you, because I know we know what you've got going on, and I just wasn't gonna do that at that point. That's how bad it was. And I know the community's listening, and I know what they're saying, because I'm one after another, and there was some positive ones. There was positive. I don't wanna be the negative Nancy here. I'm just trying to figure out, when you hear about the systems and the numbers and how low the numbers are, that's what they're gonna beat me up about. How do we fix that? How are we gonna move those numbers up? And I know we've got a lot of learning, I know we got new leaders, and I know you guys are stressed. I mean, I really appreciate what you said. Matt and Luke, when I had called them on the phone, I talked to them very openly about what I was hearing, and I can only talk to them now in this situation because of COMA and how that works, right? And so, and unfortunately, the people watching this, why are they doing this in public? Well, we can't really do it like we'd like to in a closed room to figure out what this is all about. So, with all of those parameters, I was really disappointed, to say the least, and I was embarrassed for myself because I didn't know enough, and I want to know more because I don't want to be embarrassed. But I'm personally, and I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan right now, and I want to be won over. And it's going to be really hard to do that after all what I just went through. And I can show you messages and text messages and emails and the families that I went to sit down. A lot of these people I know, some of these people I've known for 20 years, right? And when I see these surveys, this is really cool. I'd like to coincide it with what do the parents think, and then what do the sixth graders think, what do their parents think, and how is it framed, and how are we projecting that, and how can we get more information on this to figure out where our families at? Because if Joey and there's a disconnect between you for that conversation and those people that I'm hearing from. How do we get them to communicate to the right people? And how do we get the chain of command organized so people aren't trying to jump over all of you guys and Fred and everybody else before we can get a handle on some of this stuff, right, Sheila? I mean, there's a way we should be doing this, and I feel like they're so upset, they feel like nobody's listening to them. And how do we fix that? This is a good thing, but we didn't talk to the parents. And that's where I'm saying there's a disconnect. Why? Where is it at? How do we fix that? I don't have any answers, but I did sit down with enough people to just be really concerned about the direction here. And I love what I'm seeing, and I love what I'm hearing as of recently, especially since our last meeting. When was that, in October? November? 23rd. I mean, I know there's been a lot going on, and that's a big learning curve for everybody in the teams. And I can't even imagine what's going on in the buildings, but
well, and I think too, with any curriculum that we do go with or we stay with, whatever we do, we need to do something with like Parent University to teach our parents what's being taught in the classroom. Because there's a bit of disconnect between the standards that we were taught when we were in school versus what our students are learning now. And so when it comes to students struggling at home, do our parents feel like they have the tools and the knowledge just overall to help them? No matter what the platform or the curriculum is. I mean, think about the things that we're trying to teach our kids. And so, I like the idea of involving parents, but I think it needs to go a little bit further with anything that we're trying to teach our kids.
That's good feedback.
Have we sent out, Sheila, a parent survey at any point during these last almost 3 years?
I don't believe there was anything from my office that we did. If it would have been at the building level, Jennifer, Nick, Kim, can you recall? I'm trying to think. I think it was more because of redesign, we were doing it in the moment with our parents, with those people.
As far as, specific times is when we did those surveys, I don't think I can answer that for you. I'd have to go back and look, but I know that we have sent out surveys to parents, not necessarily specifically Summit based,
No, it
but
would've been much broader
redesign based
and-
with all the different things that we found in our building.
Spring of 2019, we did.
That was our first year, right?
Yeah, at the end of our first year, and then I would say around April of 2019, I remember doing that anyway.
Yeah.
All teachers were told to do it. Last year, the wheels came off in March,
Sure.
and this year, you know,
Wouldn't you say, no, though, Nick, that when we did that, though, there were other parts that were with it, that was all encompassing what Santa Fe's redesign plans were? That's what's
if
in
memory
my
serves,
mind.
yeah, I don't remember all the specifics, to be honest, but, I know that first year, since it was a new thing, we were, I remember there was a lot of push on both ways, but we were wanting as much feedback as we could get, because it was a new thing. And then, like I said, then last year, you know, we got to March, and then all of a sudden we had to change the way we were teaching from home and learn all that, and that, I'm sure it got pushed to the wayside, so.
I didn't have anything in my memory that I could remember a specific Summit thing, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm not opposed to looking at that and putting something out to parents, but if we go that route, I just want to make sure that it's, a collaborative effort, really well thought out, it's planned well. And I know there's a number of people that want to provide feedback, and if we do a survey, I just want to make sure that it's, planned for in advance, for lack of a better term.
Do you know how many teachers, at Santa Fe use Summit?
New Summit? Well, there's 20.
All the core teachers do.
20 core teachers. 4 sped teachers. And then 8 years.
For some, not the whole class, some of those.
25.
So about 25, we think?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about in capacity.
Yeah.
As far as what capacity are you speaking of, because like we have STEM teachers that use it, but off of the regular ed classes platform, if that makes sense. So the STEM teachers, or the IR and the ED classrooms, they use the courses that are already set with our regular ed teachers. And they just supplement off of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess my point is that we received this letter from, teachers from Santa Fe, and one of the main points is that we're asking for time to enhance this curriculum, which we know we can do, and 19 teachers signed on to that. So if there's about 25-ish teachers, that seems like a pretty significant, portion of our teachers who we often say up here at this table are our most valuable, asset, that are asking us kind of for more time to really perfect this, and personalize it to our district and make the best use out of it. So personally, I want to honor that request and would of course love to see more data from different students and parents on their perception, even more teachers as well. But I do think we need more time with the curriculum. Nothing happens in a year or two successfully, especially with the last 2 years that we've had. That's where I'm coming from tonight.
Well, and I agree with you to a certain degree, on that, but we do have a lot of students and a lot of families that have not done well and have experienced, some pretty questionable moments with, you know, having breakdowns at home and the parents not able to help these kids, and kids crying because they're so far behind. And that's my question, do we have enough time to turn the corner? Knowing that that is happening and that is still happening, and then what about the loss of their academics between now and then? Do we really, and I'm not advocating one way or another, I'm just saying, these are the things that I'm thinking about,
Well, when you say, do we have enough time, what is your deadline? Do we have enough time until what?
Well, what, okay, let me ask you this, so we got this data on March 8th, what if this was the first year, how would we look at this data with these low numbers in these areas? If it was our first year, I mean, what would that look like to us with these low numbers? I mean, we cannot have, I think we just have to do better, this isn't, the data that we received is not good enough for our families.
Data we received March 8th today.
I mean, when was that, the
In the end of
26th?
February.
End of February.
Which is the beginning of the semester, am I correct?
No, that would have been.
But they're pretty consistent, if you look at it, they're pretty consistent.
I'm just trying to go back to a point Joey made earlier where he said, when you look at the data at one point in time, it could look really bad because it's the very beginning, but when you look at it closer to the end, things change and kids catch up and improve. It's a different kind of system where it's not just a grade book that's either they checked it or not. If the assignments seem like they're open the whole semester, so when you look at the very beginning, of course, the numbers are gonna look really bad.
Well,
They
and
have
that's
a lot
another
of time
question,
to-
that's another question, Angela, I mean, are our families and our students going to be able to adapt to this kind of a thing with this Summit platform? You know, I just think that.
I think that's part of what Summit is trying to teach kids though, is to be able to manage your own workload and your own stress levels and skills that we all need in life. Like I'm personally, I'm a finance person, I know my budget is due in October. I'm
Right.
working on stuff now to make sure that I can hit that deadline for work so I don't get it canned.
Right, I just think that these, especially 7th and 8th graders, because that's my experience, I'm not sure that they can do that mentally.
Well, I would say whether it's Summit or anything else, they're still gonna have those due dates just like, anything else. And so if they don't get the work done, then it's still gonna affect their grade.
Right, well, and I've always said it's the visual aspect.
Yeah.
Of it, and that just intensifies it for these young kids. So I don't know if we decide to keep it, if that can be changed, because that visual, is really intensified. I mean, I've had families talk about how their kids are crying, they just throw their hands up and they can't even think to get started on it, and they're so overwhelmed.
I would really stress to those parents to reach out to us to get help, because it sounds like those particular students need some of the counseling or social work help to look at it too. Yeah, and I totally get that, but we have to help them make a plan. Because I think the important piece of it too is getting the students to work their way through things as well. And in talking about the numbers with the data, I don't know of another curriculum that you can pull and have data at the tip of, whether we like it or not, have data at the tip of your fingers like this, because really, the other traditional curriculum that we have, you can't pull data or dive down to which specific teacher or area or focus.
Yeah,
Well,
we
now,
can't
that
do
we
this kind
can
of
do
data
with
currently.
with Summit on
That's the
our
piece-
end.
Yeah, that's the piece that I really like. I don't like some of the other things, because, you know, it's hard when your kiddo's crying because they're so overwhelmed and you can't help them, because you don't know the platform.
And I think that goes back to Heidi's comment about parent university and being able to teach parents and families what this is, how to navigate the platform, how it works, so that they are able to help their students, they do understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I had found a data chart from last year from some of our parent, summit meetings, and just a comparison from last year, on January 29th of last year, our projects on track was 61%, whereas this year it was 82%. And then, like for this most recent one that you received February 26th, last year on February 26th, it was 31% projects on track, whereas this year was 39%. So even this year with all of the challenges, some of our numbers are actually improved this year compared to what they were last year. And it is an up and down, but that's one of those things that we can really get our students and our families to understand, that the due date still is the due date, even though you are able to go back and work on it, complete it for mastery if you don't understand it. but that is still a due date. That would eliminate some of that or reduce some of that up and down in the due date.
Well, obviously, there's some more conversations to be had with this and get parents involved, and I totally understand that. My question is it too far gone to bring that part back in? And that's kind of where we're at.
Joey, you shared that information with me today, and I really appreciate that. It's nice to see a little bit from years past. Just like you guys were talking about how when you pull numbers for us, the percentage might look bad at that time because of when project due dates align. It doesn't match up with exactly when you're pulling data, and I get that. And along those lines, Joey, from last year to this year, our semester times are different, thank you, COVID. And so like you guys saw an improvement this year when it came towards the end of the semester, there was that strong push to where a year ago on that date, we weren't at the end of the semester for that push. So once again, thanks to COVID, it's difficult to align things to see exact apples to apples. But I appreciate you digging that up because you also found mentoring information from last year, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
To kind of compare to this year.
Yeah, so our mentoring last year, like on that, let's see, what did I say, the 29th? It was 69% last year, and this year it was 71%. So just a little bit higher, but given all the challenges of connecting with students who are off-site, I think that's pretty good. And then, now the more recent one, on the February 26th, our mentoring was at 80% last year, and this year was at 53%. So that number was higher last year, but I'm guessing we didn't have as many 3 or 4 day weeks in that time, and I did not look at the school calendar to compare that.
And I don't have my calendar in front of me. We were not full on-site at that time this year either. We were still in hybrid at that time, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And last year they would have been full on-site.
Yes.
So that, once again, is half your students out of the building at that time this year.
I just wanted to, and I don't have a lot to add here, but I think the thing that we face here, because we're the buffer between the community and you guys, is so much of the goodwill when you've implemented this program has been burnt out. There's, you know, people are upset, and I think Andy got the full brunt of that. And I think this is, until COVID came along, as a school board member, this is probably the area that we, as school board members, heard the most complaints about, was Summit. So we're kind of in a bind here. That's where the push is. And so we have to sit here and try to figure out, okay, do we keep it another year? I mean, but there's got to be a little more accountability too. We can't keep saying, well, just give us another year, give us another year. So you have to be mindful of where we're coming from up here. This isn't just out of the blue. The other thing is, and what Andy said, and this got me thinking, I think the thing we've really got to work on is engaging those parents. But you almost have to teach the parents what they need to do to be able to be engaged. And you got to do it in multiple ways. It can't be, okay, we're going to everybody come in and get a sit and get meeting, okay? You guys don't like to teach that way, so why should the parents have to take it that way? You've got to hit people with different methods, whether it's emails, give them a placard so they can put it on the refrigerator, and this is how you get the information out of Summit kind of stuff. So we kind of have to think outside the box here as we go through this. So anyway, that's kind of, as I'm sitting here listening to this, and I've been muddling this over, trying to, I'll be honest, I don't know what to do with this. You know, it is a problem, and but at least we're talking. It's out on the table. We'd have probably had this talk, Jennifer, a lot longer ago if it hadn't been for COVID. So we're not trying to wait till the last minute, but you know, a virus took over the whole world for the last 12 months. So anyway, so that's all I wanted to say. I just kind of get those thoughts out.
I got a question for Joey. We've got this letter from Santa Fe teachers showing overwhelming majority support for Summit. Is this, you think, the same case with Chisholm?
I think our teachers are supportive of Summit, but I think we're also really tired of we're really weary of the constant battle, knowing that we don't necessarily have the full support of all of our parents. And so our teachers, I think, really like Summit. They like the data piece of it, the way it's set up with mentoring, and the projects, which is all part of our redesign. But at the same time, we understand that there's a lot of negativity surrounding it in the community. And if it means that things, I guess I need to choose my words carefully here, but I really think that if the best move is to try something else, and that's gonna to be the best for our students and our community, then we'll go in that direction. But I do know that we have a number of teachers that are just as supportive of Summit as the teachers that signed that Santa Fe letter.
And I guess that's where I'm at, you know, as a board member, is absolute belief in your staff, you know. I won't pretend to know as much about, you know, curriculums as our teachers do. I mean, you guys are the experts, and I respect you and your ability to make, you know, the best decisions for students. The other side of it that you're balancing is like what Matt talked about, it's that word of accountability. And so when we look at data, like even with the improvement from 31% to 39%, you sit there and you say, well, is that a satisfactory number? I mean, and outside of all the horror stories, just looking at the data, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm looking at the same chart. The overall contract on the same date for 7th grade is 11%, for 8th grade is 15%. And that's kind of, it's just really hard to swallow. Like, I really want to always have the teachers back, I mean, but we are gonna be held accountable on whether we're or not we're doing our job as well, you know. So I guess that's the next question is, you know, are the numbers satisfactory? And I don't think they are, and I think Fred answered this question earlier though. Well, maybe you posed the question. The question is it fixable? Is it fixable? And we're saying we can make improvements. And so, I mean, I want to believe in the teachers, you know. So those are things I'm balancing as from the board member position. As a parent, I could take it or leave it, probably maybe leave it a little bit quicker. But what I would be scared to do is, you know, part of what went wrong with Summit is we say that it didn't get implemented well. And so what I would be terrified to do is to, you know, make this choice that we're gonna drop this curriculum, not even knowing what the next curriculum is, and then have that not be implemented well. And I think even the parents that say it's gone horrible would say, well, let's not implement the next thing poorly as well, if there is gonna be a next thing. So the way I'm looking at it is, it would probably be a poor decision to say we're not gonna do this when we don't know what the next thing is, and considering that, like we heard earlier, you know, the teachers are off contract at the end of May. So I mean, the way I see it is, we could see if any improvements are actually working and make a definitive decision that, you know, at the end of next year, is this gonna continue or not? That's the way I would lean. Like I said, the data's not great, but then we're also balancing what our staff is saying about the possibility of this platform.
Also to add to that, whatever, if we did decide to move away from Summit and whatever we implement in next might not have data to look at, like old school curriculum that we all went through didn't really have data to look at any second you wanted, so it might be hard to say if something else is working or not if you don't really have the data up to the minute like we do with Summit to say, and I think that might be part of the issue here is that we have numbers to look at now.
And you can have a student that has an A and not be in the on track per se. I mean, you know, I mean, so that's something too, that's a different concept than what we're all used to and what we went through.
Victor is here talking, because I'm not a professional, I'm not in your shoes every day, and I'm trying to learn. But the data, is that something we just realized recently that we had access to, or that we could look at, and the way we could look at it, the levels that we could look at, or do you guys have had that the whole time and understood it was there, the data portion?
That might have to be a question for somebody else, because this would be their first year as principals having that in their building. And I don't mean to step on your toes if you're gonna answer that, but.
Well, is that something that teachers have available? I mean, do they have access to that?
They do. The thing that's
Now, Jennifer?
that's positive about the platform is that, you know, the teachers can go in and see the performance levels of kids and actually meaningfully group kids based upon performance levels. And that's the one thing that, like, at the beginning of, or at the end of October, when Joey came and presented, he really, and Dina hadn't had that specific training to really dive deep into that summit data. When they go through that administrative training with new administrators in the summer, it's to give them an idea kind of what the platform is like, but they don't even love to kick the tires that much, because there's not data to look at. So when we did that data dive, instructional piece, I think it was in November, I believe, or early December, that's when they got their first inoculation of, this is how you can actually look at data, to where when you're meeting with your teachers, you can have discussions about data. So that's one of the things, there is a learning curve behind all that, because before, we could look at a grade book and see how many kids have an A, a B, or a C, or a D, but you couldn't go down to an objective level like within our focus area and see how many kids struggled with this one objective. And that's when they created the workshop Wednesdays and things like that at the Chisholm, that's what they were trying to do, is get those structured to where they were actually doing some targeted instruction based upon student deficiencies. And maybe I'm incorrect in it, but I don't think those kinds of things were happening systematically across the 512 or the 5/8 spectrum in the past based upon data. That's how I understood that. Is that accurate to say?
Based on my experience, I think, yeah, I don't think that was happening on a regular basis. We also discovered that what I see and what data I have access to is a little bit more in depth than what even the teachers have. There's been a few times where we've met and the teachers express a desire to have access to some of the data that I have access to.
So there are different levels of that, like
Yeah.
you can see different things than the teachers can see.
I guess the last comment I have is that's a lot of new stuff, and it's a lot of learning, and I get all that, and I have all the confidence in the world in this team. Fred, we've already talked about this, but I think I'm gonna leave it here, because I'm struggling too, and I did get kicked in the mouth when I asked for it, so it's on me, my fault. Whatever we do, and I had a good talk with Joey, and I can't wait till we meet. I wanna lockstep and do it together as a team. The 373 family that we wanna build here, as a unit, and so whatever that decision is, promotional and help with you guys too, and everything else involved, and all the different angles, because this is a big, messy. It is messy. We got all those individuals, all those beautiful people in the middle of this thing. It makes it really interesting. But I think we can do it, but I want to do it together. And so that communication is going to happen, and we're going to have to get more data, and whatever we do, I want to make sure that we're on the same page when we move forward. So I'm just going to leave it there, and there's hard decisions that have to be made one way or the other, and we're not going to ever make everybody happy, but something has to be done.
I'm not gonna quite leave it there yet, because I think data is important, but I also think what we do with the data is most important. And so thinking about the data that we're taking from our teachers and our students, what's our next step? And that kind of goes in with our collaboration talks during our team collaboration times, and our content collaboration times. But we also need professional development. And so I wanna put that on the table a little bit, because at the beginning of the year, we were so focused on operational things and some curriculum things, and I'm not blaming it at all on that, because we do have opportunities to put things in there. But we do need to do skill building within that, because we're not gonna do anything with data that's awesome if we don't train people to do things that maybe we don't know how to do or we're not comfortable with. And so just think about, when we're thinking about an overall plan, how are we gonna maintain that plan so we can make it successful? just like our kids. We have to build that foundation for our teachers, just like we expect them to build that foundation for our students.
We're all constantly learning and growing, basically, is what we're saying, and getting better at our skill.
So we're basically talking about keeping this and starting over with the implementation.
Well, tonight it's technically just a discussion, so I know some people, I don't know if you're going here or not, I think some people might expect that we're making a decision tonight. I don't anticipate a decision tonight.
But that's what we need to be thinking about.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah. What do you think of the timeline, Fred?
Well, I've given you all some options in terms of some things to consider. It's, you know, it's a matter of what are you guys willing to put up with? Because you're the ones that are gonna catch all the heat in terms of board. You guys are the ones that catch it now. Do I think there are things that we can do within the platform and make it better? Absolutely, I do. But these folks are awfully tired. And so they're almost at the point, you know, the next board meeting is the 22nd of this month. You know, there is no time because we've got spring break in between there. If you were to make a decision to get rid of it, I think you need to make that decision as soon as possible so that we can plan. If that's the direction you're gonna go. You guys are the only ones that have votes, not me. I think that there are options that we could make it better. I mean, and we can discuss options the next time, once you've had a chance to digest some of the information here. I don't have an opinion, Matt. I know that we can make it better, but it's a matter of, you folks are the ones that are gonna catch all the heat as it relates to that. I can stand that heat because I've been through it before. And, you know, we had positive success in some instances and not in others. But I can guarantee you, we had positive success in a traditional curriculum and a lot of negative sides of that as well. So, if the board's will is to get rid of the program or get rid of it totally, I think that decision needs to be made as soon as possible. If it's to give us an opportunity to come to you with a plan to where we can try to salvage the implementation and involve the parents at a higher level, you know, we need at least until the first board member in April, or first board meeting in April, because the second board meeting of this month is a wash, there's no time. And even that would be stretching it. So, and then, you know, like I said, there are options. You could look at choice for parents. That would take some time if we were to consider that option.
But if you do that, then you're gonna have to come with an alternate curriculum for those.
Exactly. Yeah, that's messy. That's real messy. So it's, you know, it's not perfect, but I also know what we were doing before wasn't perfect either. I know that. I mean, if it was, you guys wouldn't have looked at something, I'm assuming.
Right.
You know, I mean.
Fred, I have a question. If it was before school started right now, so if it was like July or August and we were having this conversation, when would you say we need to make a decision by X date?
You mean for that year?
For the following year.
Or for the following year? Gosh, you could make that, you know, that's a tough question to answer, only because if you say, okay, we're gonna get rid of it, you say that in July. The next school year, we're not gonna have Summit. You have some teachers that don't like it anyway, for example, and won't do that with efficacy because they know it's gonna be going by the wayside. Now, I'd like to say that wouldn't happen because we're all professionals, but I also know some folks struggle with it now because they don't like it, okay? So, it's kind of one of those things, you have to be in or out as it relates to what we're gonna do, all right? If we say we're gonna commit to it for a year, and in January, we'll evaluate it again, knowing that it'll be on the, it could be, if we don't see a market improvement between now and January, or now and December, that we would just vote to eliminate it like January at that first meeting. That's something that personally, I think is a doable thing, because they've all heard it, and it's coming out to them. You know, those are the kinds of things, I don't like mixing it up, but I also like choice for parents too. But I think that's just really messy. I know the school is doing that right now, and it is hard from a scheduling perspective and stuff. But once again, we're here for students, not for the adult side of that. So, if you were to tell us right now, you've got until December, the first board meeting in December, to have had a market improvement in terms of data, and also parent perception and student achievement, and then we put up or shut up, and then you make that decision at that time. I'm good with that.
Well, I think I would like to see some kind of action plan or strategic plan on how to make this better. Because I see the benefits, but I also see the not so good things to students and families. So we've got to have something, an action plan in place of the steps that we're going to take to make sure that we are implementing it correctly, we're following up, and our students are getting, the learning that they need, and they understand it and not taking it over and over and over again. And then also that mental piece of it, because that's a real thing.
And we do have to get rid of the name Summit. It needs to be Newton's. I mean, it really, really does, because we say Summit does this, Summit does that. What do our teachers do? I don't remember ever saying, I think my textbook was Prentice Hall. I don't remember saying Prentice Hall does this.
We could call it the Blue Death.
We could call it the Blue Death. You know, so, and that's one of the things that, you know, having heard that we were told we can't modify this, I'm going baloney, you can't. Now, that's a dual edge to that too. If you're gonna modify, you better make sure you have quality resources and not junk, and you better make sure you vetted the resources, and that the projects are quality and they're aligned with those objectives and things like that. So, I mean, but that's what teachers do, they create. And some folks, they think if they just adopt a platform, one of the things that teachers do like to do is create. And so some folks, they get turned off by that because they feel like they have no license to do that anymore. You know, and that's really an unfortunate thing. Within those projects, they can really take those and make those really, really powerful. But if they felt like they couldn't do that in the past, because it was a dictate from on high or from wherever, that's not the case. The thing is that one teacher can't take and go this total crazy direction, right? And the other people within that curricular area not be on that same page. That's why they have to have that time to collaborate. So I agree there needs to be a plan for how this is done. I also think they focus on important things, a few important things at a time, to get that sorted out and then move to the next important thing within that plan, and not try to eat that whole elephant at one time.
So would this be reasonable, a plan for improvement, or however you want to frame it, presented to the board, by the end of the school year, and then we make a hard decision in January or December?
Yeah, I think that's fair,
Because I think
very fair.
what I'm hearing a lot of is questions, and we need to learn more about this, and blah, 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 but I think the community kind of, and the school community as well, kind of really needs to know, like, what's the deal here, what are you guys thinking, what are you, and I don't think any of us are really 100% on any side of this.
Everybody needs to be on the same page, I think, is what we're trying to get to here.
You said you were done.
Yeah, for me, honestly, if it wasn't for you guys, I'd be done. 100% done. But because of you guys, I can't be. And that's hard for me as an individual, because I know a lot of you guys. I've been around you guys for a long time. I grew up around a lot of you guys in my adult life. How do we fix it together? And how do we, some cost bias, I've talked to this about with Fred, and it's like, at the city, you spend $2 million, and then you're gonna spend another $500,000, because that's really gonna push this project over the edge. Then you spend another $500,000, and 4 years later, you spent another $3 million on top of the $2 million just to try to fix it. And you realize that it's done. Or like a storage unit. You put $400 of stuff in a storage unit, and you're costing $75 a month, and you're just gonna have it there for 5 or 6 months, because I've done that stuff. I've done it. This is what, I mean, I'm that guy. Well, 5 years later, you realize there's a direct deposit coming out of your account, and you go in there and you open the door and you go, man, this stuff it was worth $400 when I put it in there. Then, my mom bought me that fridge when I went to college, and then I get all emotional and I get attached to it. There's a hard time and a hard point that we have to make. Angela, like what you're saying, what's that hard date? What is this curriculum changeover, if we're gonna have one? What is that? What does it look like? And how do we take their emotional health into account with all the moving parts that have to happen? Whether we stay here or move it, and what are those benchmarks? I don't have all those answers, guys, but we have to do something.
Because when we're talking about 39%, and I'm supposed to sell that to my community, they're gonna kick me in the face like they already did. And that's my reality. So honestly, I'm just on the table, that's where I'm at.
So I know this conversation's kind of going towards a plan and dates and all of that. Y'all know me for a little bit. I actually have some questions myself. I sat quiet and for a while let you do your thing. 'Cause
Well, look at the time.
I know, right?
Don't you have a-
We have a 2.5 hour time limit.
So I know what I'm gonna ask, but I don't know what you guys are gonna ask, so I wanted to let you guys do that. Some of these questions are really short answers. And some of them are for district staff, some are for building staff. But before I get into this, just really quickly, sometimes we ask these questions, and Angela, it may seem like we're just asking so many questions, but part of this is for the benefit of the parents that are watching, because they haven't been involved in these meetings. They aren't aware of some of this information. I think it's important for our community to know that out of 7 of us, 4 of us, Luke, Matt, Melissa, and myself, have been parents of Summit kids. So we've seen it not only from the board side and the community side, but from the parent side. Luke and I, if I remember your kids' ages right, we've had kids in this is our 3rd year. So we have had we put our kids into Summit year after year after year. So we're not blind to what's been happening. We literally give you our kiddos. And like Fred said, and we've talked about multiple times, our role, and like Luke alluded to, is our goal as a board ultimately comes down to providing the best possible quality education to our students. We're here to provide a service, and that's to our students and to our families. And I know that we're not always going to agree, and we'll have different ideas of the path to take to reach a goal, but I believe that we share the same goal as a district, as a board, as admins, as teachers, to provide the best opportunities for all of our kids, even when that gets messy sometimes. So I do want to work as a team to get to that goal, even though we don't know exactly what that path is going to look like. So a few of the questions that I have, Sheila, a couple of these are going to be for you right off the bat, put you on the spot. When did district staff either get introduced to Summit, or when did they visit some of those other schools that had already implemented Summit? I'm not seeing that on the timeline that you had given me. Remember?
Yeah, so I'll kind of talk out loud and see if I can think back. So, personalized learning is a redesign principle for Kansas. So that's how it became a first part of the conversation. And I want to say that we went to Topeka, and I'm looking at Jennifer and trying to think, January.
We went to Oklahoma City in January and visited a school that was using it.
Of what year?
I know, I'm trying to.
Probably
Was it 18?
18 or 19,
I
you were
think it
19.
would be,
The 2018.
Okay.
My first year teaching was yeah, we did 2018.
yeah.
I was right.
So then I'm also seeing, as I look through this information, kind of the battle wigs, the war wigs that were developed by Santa Fe. When were those developed? Do you remember timeline? I mean, we're going back years here.
So that's still the same part of it so it would have been the May that your staff voted, they had to have 80% or more that said we want to redesign.
So May of 17.
May of 17, right? Yeah, and then they would have been working that 17, 18 on those goals.
Okay.
But I think at Chisholm, it started in the fall of 2019.
So we began the process, I'm sorry. I would like the flyer. Okay. We started the same time as Santa Fe, so whatever you just said, I already forgot. That first year of writing our battle waves, and we visited Oklahoma as well. And then we decided to not do full implementation the next year. We decided to do a year of piloting, and then we fully implemented a year later.
And the piloting year was
Half of the.
Would have been,
Yeah,
18,
August
19.
18.
18, 19.
18
August, yeah.
pilot year.
Yeah.
So as I'm kind of looking through the timeline of how this progressed, as far as applying, for redesign, it looks like in January of 18, and this is a long time ago, but I feel like we've been talking about this for a really long time, so makes sense. January of 18, district visited some Summit schools to kind of see what that looked like. A month later, applied for Summit. So within that month, decided that they wanted to use Summit, and then implemented that in August of 2018, correct? So from February, deciding to use it, 6 months later, it was implemented. Okay, because, like we've heard tonight and we've heard in the past, there's not enough time if we make a switch, and I do completely understand whatever we do needs to be well thought out and well planned for. I don't want to throw anything just out there and hope it sticks, because it won't with that attitude, or with that plan. But I did find it interesting today as I was reviewing this, that the time from looking at Summit, visiting a school, and deciding to use it to implementation in the schools was actually a pretty short amount of time. Six-ish months. And granted, I know it's not a good excuse, but we didn't have COVID then, so time is so different now. Are we locked into Summit because of redesign? I hear that response, and I just need to ask you. Okay, perfect. Joey actually helped me with this question earlier today, which I appreciate when he said he kind of scaled down the information he gives us in our board docs for the numbers and the charts, because that's helpful to just see snapshots. But you have the ability, and it was nice to see today, that we can see a breakdown for power focus areas that are off track. So we can see how many students are behind in 1 versus behind in 5. And I think that's important to note, because that is a huge spectrum. If they're behind in 1, and that might just be a few days, a week, depending on that student, or 5 behind. So I like that we can see that, and that might be helpful moving forward to kind of include that in some information. I'm a numbers girl, and I really like those things. When Summit adds new resources within the platform, in power focus areas, what is the process for vetting those new articles, websites, any of that when they're added to the platform?
So, I think our teachers go through that because they're the ones that are teaching the curriculum. So whenever there's new resources, they would go through that and check them and see if it fits, and they are able to adjust if needed as far as the resources. I know, like, last year was a learning curve as far as what's in there, as far as all the different resources and the links and the things like that. So I know at least one of our content areas, social studies, created their own class this past year, using and developing some of their own resources. And then others have made some adjustments this year. And so that's one of those things that as we continue to learn the curriculum and go through it and are able to really see what works and what doesn't work, then we can make adjustments, or we can keep what works really well, we can take out what doesn't work. But I also know that a lot of that's in coordination with like Sheila's office, because she's our curriculum person, so we should want to make sure that everything is still aligned K through 12 as well.
I know that you talked about Rayler Power Hour, and I saw something in here for Santa Fe within your battle wigs, and it talks about, that's the Chisholm page, it talks about offering after school time at least 3 days a week for students to receive support at Santa Fe. Is there an after school program at Santa Fe that is similar to Rayler Power Hour?
There isn't, but we will be starting one. Our, funding is smaller too, and so I think it'll be from at least fourth quarter.
Okay.
Trying to catch, to get the most bang for our buck. But they have done it in the past.
Right.
Over time.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Will we be provided, and this might be a district question as well, and I know it's a hard year, but we're still accountable to our students and our families even through COVID. Will we see some data as far as fast bridge scores? I not only expect a summer slide, but a COVID slide, just kind of a picture. Are we seeing growth as for individual students? Or can we kind of see an overview of some of those results? At some point, that would be helpful. I know a big selling point for Summit is the data that's available to teachers and admins, and I do like that piece. I think it'd be really beneficial. I agree with what Heidi said. Your data's only as good as how you use it, which is very important. And this, I guess I go back to Sheila again, since you're not a new admin this year in the building, you get to field these. How has the data over the last 2 3/4 of a year, how have we been utilizing that? Has it been consistent through the last almost 3 years, or has it just been more recently, kind of this year, we've been digging into that?
As far as looking at the dashboard, or?
As far as some of the questions that we're looking at now, as far as on track, overall, grade-wise, I know that teachers use it they use different data on a different level to kind of put together individual groups within their classroom, but I'm thinking district-wide, building-wide, how are we utilizing that?
I would say that the amount of time that we have put in, we meaning Fred and I and the 4 administrators at Santa Fe and Chisholm, is markedly different than what it was prior to this year. And that, to add clarity to that, meaning that there would be coaching calls that we would have twice a month, just like we do now. I would be a part of those, but it was not both of these positions that were a part of those conversations and those discussions. And then to go deeper than, like what we've been talking about, what are we doing with the data, how are we trying to take steps to give support to whether it's the teachers or professional development, or pick a topic as far as what we're going to do with it.
So this year, it would be safe to say that we've been utilizing data more and differently than we have in the previous 2 years? Significant difference? Okay. Fred, you talked about doing some different changes within the Summit platform. What are our options? How much freedom do we have within that platform to make it ours, to make our changes? What are we locked into with Summit?
In terms of curricular pieces, what you have to think about, like if you deviate from the power focus areas, for example, those test banks or those question banks are specific to those objectives within those power focus areas. And those power focus areas should, for the most part, actually they should, not for the most part, they should align with those projects. So, to me, a lot of the projects are a lot more text-based, and I think it will be more enjoyable for the kids and for the teachers to do some more hands-on types of projects. I know in science, I think that they are doing some of those, but I'm not sure, whether or not in those other content areas. Math is a whole different critter. They just don't do it like that. But you have latitude within them to enhance those projects. That was one of the things in my previous district that we were actually incentivizing our staff to do to make them more hands-on.
And so Sheila, sorry, the veteran, you did all of these, I should have just met with you. Have we been doing that district-wide the past 2 years, almost 3 years now? Or is that something that would be a significant change that we would make if that was the choice?
So as far as being able to make changes to the platform, is that what you're asking, or?
Has it been kind of, and the answers that I received actually vary from building to building, as far as teaching, being told to teach what was on the Summit platform without making changes. And we have different admins, we have so many different staff members, so I'm sure there is some issue there of expectations, were expectations laid out or not, I don't know
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely, so I could put any name of resource in there. If it would be PLTW that's being used at, our K4 buildings, the Wonders resource that we've just adopted at K4 to, you pick one. It would be the same consistent message every year. Anytime that you're going to be in the first year of using a new resource, any, provider, whatever it be, the Summit Coach or, the publishing company and usually those that are in there that are consulting with us would be those that were teachers from the classroom would say. And teachers I know would have heard the word fidelity, doing it with fidelity, so that you can find out, is this everything that we need for it to be? Because if all of us are teachers here and using one resource and we each individually decide that we're gonna do it our own way, there is no one way for us to find out what was effective. So that would be a consistent message regardless of the resource. However, what I hear when people say, well, we were told we couldn't, you know, the way in which the message was received and the way in which it might have been delivered, because you can have, all of us are gonna have a certain understanding here tonight about how our conversations have gone. But then those that are gonna ask, well, what happened at the board table? What did they say when they asked that question? You know, so I think that is where you would have challenges with any new adoption.
And when we talk about teachers adapting it and making changes, I don't want anyone to think that we are just letting every individual go rogue if they so desire. That's not at all what we're talking about. But I do want to make it clear that if we stick with this and make changes, that there is that freedom for grade bands, content areas, whatever that breakdown would look like, that teachers would develop, that we can make adjustments for our kids, knowing that some have to be made. And Joey, you said something this afternoon that has just been playing over and over in my mind again, and I will not repeat it as eloquently as you said it on the fly. But you made the comment that if we change curriculum, it's going to be messy and it's going to be a lot of work. But if we keep Summit, it's also going to be an equal amount of hard work. There's no easy way moving forward because we know we have to make changes. And you put it into words that I really hadn't gotten to that point yet, but you're so right that if we do choose to stay with Summit, I want our families to understand, our staff to understand, it's not going to be the same Summit that we've introduced. There will have to be changes, it'll take hard work. And I don't know that any of us right now, tonight, at 9:40, know exactly what that's going to look like. Because if we knew, we would have already done this, honestly. But I do want to keep in mind through all of this, I know it's a hard conversation for some people. This is the first time it's come up, the first year that they've been involved. This has been a multiple year conversation within this district, so it's not new. I do appreciate staff, I appreciate you guys coming in and sitting in a hot seat tonight, answering lots of questions. I've gotten to meet with all four of you at different times, and you've been very, very helpful and open, and flip your screens and show me, like Heidi is a self-proclaimed nerd, I love that. Show me what you have. It's been really, really helpful. So thank you for your time. I know it's hard for you being in this position, hearing negative feedback, but maybe not hearing it firsthand from your families. And that would be something that I encourage to our board members and parents that are watching. If you have concerns and you have issues, the best first step is to go to the person that's closest to the situation. So oftentimes that's going to be your classroom teacher. Reach out to your teacher. They spend the most time with your kiddo. Talk to your teacher. If you're not satisfied with that or have more questions, move to your building administrator. There's multiple steps up, but I think it's so important to really start with your teacher and let them know, because like Dina said, they can get you to a resource or maybe some social emotional help, maybe answer some questions within the platform. So please don't overlook that. We do want to hear from you, but please don't overlook your building people first.
there anything, that you guys want to say that hasn't already been said? Anybody any staff in the audience, do you guys wanna add anything? If you're here, I just wanna give you a moment. No pressure.
Same uncomfortable weight on your hip.
I don't know. I think tonight you gave us a letter, I can tell you guys you put a lot of thought into that. You put your heart into that. I appreciate that very much that you've done that. You guys came and spoke during public comment time, which is open. You guys are a great example. It's open to staff. It's open to parents, open to anybody to come in at any meeting. Take your time and talk to us. If you don't feel comfortable tonight, you're more than welcome to email, reach out anytime to any of us.
I would just say, that the data points we're looking at on Summit, maybe, you know, we have that on track term, which you can have a 95 and still be off track if the line passes on one focus area. SDL is not the whole of what Summit is. They are not just sitting on computers doing the work by themselves. That's just one day of my week and just an afternoon. We are doing whole group instruction. It looks like a traditional classroom. My students are engaged every day. We're doing stuff together, we're collaborating. It's not all just computer work. And the data points that I would take to like look at on, for example, the Summit data, the projects on track overall is 89%. Projects are 80% of their grade. So that's the number of projects that they have done, that they have 70% or higher in as well. COG skills above 70%, that's their projects, ELA, social studies, and science, above 70% and 77% overall. Math units, that's just math, because that one's set up a little bit different, but that's 69% above 70%. Those are great grades. So I would just say, like, the data points we're looking at, I think we could dive deeper on and really see positives in. And I still do extend my invitation to all of you to come to my classroom to see it in real life, so.
Thank you.
If nobody has any other questions, comments, anything at all, the last item is department reports. And there was one that was added in here.
Sorry, can we go back? Are we sticking with what I said earlier, that we're gonna come back with a plan?
Well, I say, I got
I
written
just
down
wanna know
here.
what the end result of this conversation is.
On the agenda tonight, it was posed as a discussion.
Mhm.
I think questions that have been brought up, meetings that are going to be had, I would personally like to allow at least a couple more weeks for that to sit, resonate, ask some questions, talk with admins, just get a little more feedback, because we put a lot of information out on the table. We've asked a lot of questions to our admins. They might think of some things over the next few days, over the next week. Staff may want to reach out, because we have a lot of staff that's not been in this room tonight. So coming into this meeting, it was posed as a discussion. I don't necessarily want to make a hardcore decision tonight for people who might feel like they were caught off guard at that time, since that was not on our agenda tonight.
So we're gonna circle back a month or so, or?
What do you think about in a couple of weeks, seeing which direction that
At the
expectations
end of March,
perhaps?
or at the March meeting?
Yes,
That's when we can, I will summarize in my weekly notes and send out what I perceive as a potential landing point for a plan for the remainder of this year, a plan for, with a due date like in June for the next fall, and then a drop dead date where we make a decision based upon data in December for the following year. So I'll just summarize that in my weeklies, and that will give folks a chance to ruminate, and then we can have another discussion on the 27th.
I would personally like that. I think with so much being put out there tonight, I'd like people to just have a little time to mull it over, staff, teachers, parents, because tonight was really overwhelming for some people, a lot of information.
You guys will leave here, and you'll get the same folks angry at you, why didn't you get rid of it when you had the chance, kind of a thing. And that's the thing that you have to kind of grasp, or grapple with a little bit.
Well, and one thing we haven't talked about in this discussion that adds another layer is transition from building to building. So we have a different curriculum platform 5 through 8, and then these kids go to high school, and it's not the same. So that's gotta be another conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not that uncommon in a lot of these platforms, though, or in a lot of these, where they have a traditional secondary school, and they have it feeder with the summit platform. That's not that uncommon. So, but yeah.
Within these reports, I know we normally skip over them. I think especially discussing our, points tonight, Sam added a communications update in here, and I like to see feedback for how our parents like to be, contacted. And so, Matt, you brought up that point of using a variety of different ways to communicate with parents. And so I think it's nice to see that, and interestingly enough, I don't have my glasses on, written out seems to be the mode that people prefer, rather than videos. And I just have to note, because we're gonna hear all about it in other ways, that 46% of people say the district communicates too much. So when we hear that there's not enough communication, only 4.8 said not enough. So, thank you for including that, Sam, because that's really helpful for a lot of different areas. Finally, board comments. Andy.
Woo!
Glad we got all that on the table. You can deal with whatever emails and stuff comes, as long as we're doing the right thing for the kids at the end of the day. And I know this group over here and this group over here is all about that, so I can live with whatever comes. But we need to take some action, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we do as a team together. Today is International Women's Day, and we have a lot of amazing people. I just wanted to list out real quick. Our city manager, Kelly, she's amazing. Amazing human being, great leader, top shelf, just awesome. Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Pam Stevens. We have a Newton Medical Center CEO, Val Gleason. We have a Harvey County Health Department, Lynette Reddington. And then we have many, many others. And then we have all these amazing women here, but our president of our board, Mallory Morton. And so we have a bunch of other great leaders, but I just want to say shout out to all the women out there doing your thing and working hard and changing the world. Love you guys, appreciate what you do, and you bring something special to every team that you're on, and just grateful to be working with you guys at this table.
I just want to say thank you guys. It was good to hear your viewpoint. I've heard a lot of the parents' viewpoint and the kiddos' viewpoint, so it gives us a lot to think about, and we will think about it everything really seriously. So we really appreciate you guys coming up here.
You guys are tired. How in the world did I make it through this many wrestling fans and nobody said it? So I'm gonna say it. It's been on Facebook. Shout out, a huge, amazing shout out to two of our graduates, Logan Treaster and Wyatt Hendrickson, that have qualified for the NCAA championships. That is amazing. So proud. I know they're doing really great things in life, but they're always gonna be railers for us. And I think it's so great to see our kids succeed while we have them in our district, but then all of the accomplishments that they get later on in life. And while we're focused over the next few weeks for these two young men on their wrestling accomplishments, which are outstanding, I think it's worthy to note that both of these gentlemen are attending service academies in our military, and they're going to become officers in the military and just outstanding men. And I think they're just two examples of so many of our kids that are changing the world every day, and I'm just so proud of them. So tune in and watch them and wish them well. Thank you again to staff who stuck it out. So almost 10 o'clock, we're gonna get you out before 10. Send me your coffee order in the morning and I'll I don't have to get up. So after I have mine, thank you for, I know it's been hard sitting here and fielding questions that you didn't know what was coming. So I appreciate that. I hope that this conversation has been received, as we intend it to be, which is just talk across the table of how do we get to the point of serving our kids the best. We support you guys and we want to do everything we can while still being accountable. So thank you for your honest, genuine conversations, because I think that's the only way that we're going to get anywhere. And I'm looking forward to working as a whole district, from staff up through board and back down. I know we have good things in the future, it'll just be messy getting there, so thank you for your time. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? 7-0.
Past 7:30.